Chapter 662. Because Xiao Xian had saved his son. And because he was special, as a shaman of a tribe, the caution and wariness he should have as a tribe shaman had been cast aside. He was too careless. Even if he felt that Xiao Xian wasn't that kind of person, he shouldn't have acted based on his personal opinion when it came to the fire seed. The Jing shaman fell silent. Although he didn't show it on his face, he was already starting to feel anxious. He stared straight at the quagmire. If anyone below made any strange movements, he would immediately take action. Miao, who was in the house, had already recovered. Although his vision was still blurry when he opened his eyes, it wasn't a big deal. He didn't want to be treated the same way again, but he still couldn't suppress his curiosity. If Xiao Xian hadn't entered the quagmire, he wouldn't have provoked Xiao Xian. But now that Xiao Xian had entered the quagmire, Miao also wanted to know what an outsider like him could do in the quagmire. He didn't want to be rescued when he got lost at the bottom of the quagmire. Luckily, Xiao Xian didn't look over this time. This made Miao heave a sigh of relief. Xiao Xian's eyes were too scary. At this moment, the Xiao Xian had already focused all his attention on sensing the movements around him. The Jing shaman's third eye could open normally in the quagmire, and he could see things without being disturbed by the muddy water at the bottom of the quagmire. However, the Xiao Xian couldn't. The Jing shaman's third eye was special, and he couldn't compare. The muddy water would damage the eyes, so after being dragged to the bottom of the quagmire, the Xiao Xian kept his eyes closed. Luckily, with his special vision, even with his eyes closed, the Xiao Xian could still see the situation around him through his eyelids. This was something the others didn't know. After sinking to the bottom of the quagmire, the Xiao Xian didn't immediately move. Instead, he stood quietly on the spot and observed the situation around him. Under the quagmire, the pressure from the muddy water around him was at least twice as much as that of a normal river or lake. Moreover, this was the pressure he felt when he was still. If he wanted to lift his feet and walk under the quagmire, he would need to expend even more energy. This was also why the shaman was so tired that he had to come ashore to rest after only taking a slow walk under the quagmire. In Xiao Xian's vision, the ground eyes around him were glowing dots of light. Some were bright, some were dark. They were all ground eyes, and those glowing dots were actually the ground eye stones inside the ground eyes' bodies. In Xiao Xian's vision, ordinary ground eye stones were dull gray. Only high-quality ground eye stones and universal eyes were brighter, especially the universal eyes, which were especially bright. When the universal eye passed by Xiao Xian, it left behind a trail of light in Xiao Xian's vision. Based on this pattern, Xiao Xian only needed to search for the brightest spot. Xiao Xian didn't know how the true eye looked like, but he knew how bright the universal eyes were. What he needed to do now was to search for a spot in the quagmire that was brighter than the two universal eyes from before. Then he needed to catch it. Although he didn't know if the true eye could be used on Caesar, he still had to try. Caesar still followed the hunting team out to hunt in the tribe, but his mobility was still lacking compared to before. Especially in the forest full of danger and fierce beasts, his mobility was greatly restricted. Every time old Ke saw Caesar's injuries, he wondered if he should let Caesar change professions. For example, pulling carts at the Flaming River trading point. Unfortunately, Caesar wasn't willing. Pulling carts was just a part-time job. He liked to hunt more. Now that he was hungry, he would go out to the forest to look for food. He even brought food for old Ke. If he could give that guy an eye, even if he couldn't recover to his peak condition, as long as he was better than now, it would be worth Xiao Xian's visit. Beside the quagmire, everyone saw that after Xiao Xian went down he didn't move. The rope tied to Xiao Xian's body also stopped moving. Could he be trapped by the mud at the bottom of the quagmire? Is that why he can't move? Someone whispered. Bullshit, how strong can the mud in the quagmire be? It's impossible to trap a Xinjiao tribesman. He's just walking around in the quagmire. How could such a small thing trouble our grand elder? Duoli refuted without hesitation. But they didn't understand why Xiao Xian didn't move after he went down either. Hey, it's moving! It's moving! Someone suddenly shouted. Everyone looked over. The rope tied to Xiao Xian's body was indeed moving. This meant that Xiao Xian was starting to walk around in the quagmire. It also proved that what Duoli said was true. Although the Jing tribesmen didn't say anything, they didn't agree with Duo Li's words. Just walking around in the quagmire? Such a small thing? If it was that simple, then the Jing tribesmen wouldn't have so many restrictions on the central quagmire. Others didn't know, but many of the Jing elders knew. When the central quagmire was first dug, it was used as a second line of defense for the Jing tribe. If there was any danger, the Jing tribesmen would retreat into the central quagmire to seek refuge. This quagmire had swallowed countless beasts. However, the beasts that were swallowed into the quagmire had already become a part of it. Not even their bones were left behind. Xiao Xian also realized that after he sank to the bottom of the quagmire, his originally sharp sense of direction seemed to have been blocked. If it weren't for his special vision that allowed him to see the traps at the bottom of the quagmire, Xiao Xian might have really gotten lost in the quagmire. He had been standing at the bottom of the quagmire for a while now, so he got used to the pressure and resistance. He also had a basic understanding of the environment, but now Xiao Xian needed some fresh air. So he walked towards the stairs at the bottom of the quagmire. There were stairs made of stones at the bottom of the quagmire. After he stepped on them, he would be able to emerge from the quagmire. The Jing shaman, who was standing outside the quagmire, originally wanted to tell the Yinjiao people where to pull the rope to remind Xiao Xian. However, he saw the rope tied to Xiao Xian move towards the stairs before the Yinjiao people pulled it. Seeing this, the Jing shaman couldn't help but open his 3 eyes wide. He looked at the bottom of the quagmire again, and saw Xiao Xian walking towards the stairs. He didn't have any intention to test it out. His footsteps were steady, as if he was sure there were stairs there. How was this possible? The Jing shaman couldn't understand. Xiao Xian didn't have a third eye, so how did he find the stairs so accurately? Before Xiao Xian entered the quagmire, he had pointed out the stairs to Xiao Xian. But everyone in the Jing tribe knew that even if they could clearly identify the place outside the quagmire, once they entered the quagmire, it was as if their memories were messed up, and they kept going in the wrong direction. Seeing Xiao Xian's head emerge from the quagmire, the Yinjiao people let out a sigh of relief. Wei and the others, whose faces were tense, also smiled. Duoli looked proudly at the Jing people who were watching. His eyes seemed to be telling them, "Did you see that? I wasn't lying, right?" Xiao Xian raised his hand to wipe the mud off his face. He said to Wei and the others, "Throw me a rope. I'll tie my hands." The Jing shaman looked at Xiao Xian in surprise. "You want to catch it yourself?" "Yes, there was a universal eye that passed by me just now. It was the one that made the sound. If I can't find the true eye, I'll catch a universal eye first." Xiao Xian caught the rope that was thrown over. This was what the Jing people often used to tie their hands. After tying the rope around their hands, even if the ground ice spun very fast, with the rope's protection, they wouldn't hurt their hands directly. This rope was used as a glove. The Jing shaman opened his mouth. He wasn't sad that the Xiao Xian had taken the universal eye. He promised to let Xiao Xian go down, so he didn't care much about the universal eyes in the quagmire. What he was surprised about was that Xiao Xian didn't lose his sense of direction at the bottom of the quagmire. Not only could he walk freely, but he also planned to catch the universal eyes. "All right, be careful." The Jing shaman didn't say anything else. He felt that Xiao Xian only found the universal eye because of its sound. If that was the case, then he could continue to sit by the quagmire and watch the show. If Xiao Xian caught the universal eye, then even if he couldn't find the true eye, he wouldn't be angry. It was better to have something than nothing. If Xiao Xian couldn't catch the universal eye, then he would catch it for Xiao Xian after he rested for a while. The more the Jing shaman thought about it, the more he felt that this was a good thing. He continued to sit by the side and watched as Xiao Xian took a deep breath and sank into the quagmire again. As for the true eye, in the Jing shaman's opinion, Xiao Xian definitely wouldn't be able to catch it. Even if there was a true eye next to Xiao Xian, he wouldn't be able to find it. A true eye wouldn't make that kind of sound. He still had to rely on the Jing tribe. After confirming that Xiao Xian wasn't in any trouble, the Yinjiao people started joking around. They even chatted with the Jing people about who had the highest chance of getting first place this year. While they were chatting, they didn't forget to promote the Flaming River trading point. They told them that if they needed food or animal hides in the future, they could go there and trade with ground eye stones. Xiao Xian, who was at the bottom of the quagmire, had already started to follow the Jing shaman's footsteps and walk along the quagmire. As the Jing shaman, he was naturally more experienced. Xiao Xian walked along the Jing shaman's path. It was probably the safest and least likely route to miss the target. The mud at the bottom of the quagmire made Xiao Xian feel like he was walking against the wind. Even if he stopped, he wouldn't be blown away. If he was tired, he could still rest. It was just that he couldn't breathe fresh air, so he felt a little suffocated. Every once in a while he would have to find a platform to breathe. The full moon was in the sky. As Xiao Xian walked around the quagmire, he realized that there were more and more ground eyes in the middle of the quagmire. Some ground eyes crawled out from the walls of the quagmire, while others crawled out from under the carpet. On the ground eyes from other places were gathering here. The Jing fire seed was especially attractive to them on this day. They were like moths attracted to a flame in the dark night, rushing towards the Jing fire seed. That was why in Xiao Xian's vision, there were more and more light spots. There was one more universal eye. The night was still long, so there might be more universal eyes crawling out. The Jing shaman said that tonight was the most active night of the year for ground eyes. He just didn't know if he would be able to see a true eye. The Jing shaman opened his third eye wide. When he saw Xiao Xian walk past a universal eye floating in the quagmire, he couldn't help but smile. Sure enough, that kid was just judging by the sound. But then, the policeman saw the universal eye that was spinning rapidly in the quagmire. It walked past Xiao Xian several times, but Xiao Xian didn't move at all. The Jing shaman was puzzled. If it happened once or twice, he could say that the kid didn't react in time. But 3, 4, 5 times? What was that kid thinking? Chapter 663. Xiao Xian walked at the bottom of the quagmire. His speed wasn't fast, but it was the same as when the shaman was at the bottom of the quagmire. He did plan to catch a universal eye, if he couldn't find a true eye. That way, his trip to the bottom of the quagmire wouldn't be in vain. But when he walked at the bottom of the quagmire, he suddenly felt like he was being watched by someone. It was as if someone was watching his movements in the dark. This attention wasn't from Miao or the shaman. Xiao Xian could tell that these two people were watching him. He could even feel that Miao and the shaman were watching him. But this third gaze wasn't from above. It was from the bottom of the quagmire. Xiao Xian peered through his eyelids and looked around him. There were more and more spots of light. Just in the area around him, there were no less than 20 ground eyes. However, most of them weren't bright enough to meet Xiao Xian's requirements. These ground eyes were at most high-quality ground eye stones. They didn't even have a universal eye. Xiao Xian couldn't see the entire quagmire. It wasn't big, but it wasn't small either. It wasn't big because it was small compared to some large natural lakes. It wasn't small because it was man-made. It was almost twice as big as the man-made lake at the foot of Yinjiao's main mountain. This was also why the Jing tribe had a large area but little land. The quagmire took up too much of the land. The further it was from Xiao Xian, the blurrier the spots of light became. In other words, even if there was a brighter spot of light, if it was too far away from Xiao Xian wouldn't be able to tell what kind of ground eye it was. It was just like looking at the stars at night. A dimmer star didn't mean it wasn't bright. It was just a matter of distance. Ground eyes weren't slow when swimming in the quagmire. The higher the level of the ground eye, the faster it could swim. Ground eyes were a special kind of animal. They could also sense the presence of humans. When Xiao Xian was walking, many of them noticed Xiao Xian. Some would quickly avoid him, while others ignored him. But these gazes didn't give Xiao Xian a strong feeling. It was far less intense than the one in the dark. There was no murderous intent, no aggression, and no emotions. In the Jing quagmire, other than the ground eyes, there weren't any other dangerous beasts that could attack. Xiao Xian was guessing. If the gaze in the quagmire came from a ground eye, what level was it? He had already felt the universal eye, and it was even stronger than the universal eye. Was it a true ground eye? If it's a ground eye, why didn't he see it? Maybe he couldn't see its spot? Thinking up to this point, Xiao Xian looked in the direction of the gaze. The source of the gaze changed according to Xiao Xian's movements. Every time Xiaoxian was about to get close, it would quickly run away and maintain a certain distance from Xiaoxian. Within this distance, it wasn't easy for Xiaoxian to see what it really was. After tracking it a few times, Xiaoxian only locked onto one spot. But because of the distance, Xiaoxian didn't know how bright it was. He could only compare it to the other ground eyes and estimate that it was at least at the level of the universal eye. But because there were more and more light spots in the quagmire, it was easy for people to overlook it. Xiaoxian continued to chase after the light spot. If he lost it, he would rely on his intuition to determine the source of the gaze. After walking around the quagmire, Xiaoxian stepped on the steps at the bottom of the quagmire and popped his head up to breathe. After the suffocating feeling in his chest disappeared, Xiaoxian said to Wei and the others who were following him around the quagmire, "Later on, I might run a little too fast. You can loosen the rope." Although they didn't understand what Xiaoxian meant by running a little too fast, Wei and the others still loosened the rope. Normally, when the Jing people went into the quagmire, one end of the rope would be tied to the person going into the quagmire, and the other end would be tied to a wooden stake. The wooden stake was deeply embedded in the quagmire, and the part that was exposed above the ground was about 6 meters long. The other end of the rope was a third above the stake, and there was a basket on top of the stake. In the basket, there was a large coil of straw rope. There were a total of 10 wooden stakes like this, and they were distributed in 10 different directions around the quagmire. In the past, when people went into the quagmire, they would only move in one direction. If they went beyond the designated area, the rope would easily get tangled at the bottom of the quagmire if there were too many people. After all, in the entire Jing tribe, other than the people with the third eye, everyone else had to rely on the rope to move. If the rope got tangled up, they would have a lot of trouble too. But now, only the Xiaoxian was going into the quagmire. The reason why he could move freely at the bottom of the quagmire was because the rope on his body wasn't fixed. Wei and the others were holding it, so when Xiaoxian moved at the bottom of the quagmire, they would follow him. Now Xiaoxian told Wei and the others to stop holding the rope. He also untied the rope on his body. If he ran around the quagmire, the rope might tie him up. The center of the quagmire was solid ground, just like an island in the middle of a lake. The center of the quagmire was piled up with rocks. That was where the Jing tribe's fire pit was located. When the Jing people encountered danger, they would go there to take refuge. So if the rope was tied up, Xiaoxian would be hindered if he wanted to chase after his target. Since they were sure that Xiaoxian wouldn't have a problem moving around at the bottom of the quagmire, the Yinjiao people didn't have to worry too much even if they untied the rope. They were even guessing if Xiaoxian could catch a universal eye. The Jing shaman, who was sitting in the same spot and watching the show, finally stood up. Because he was sitting in the same spot, he didn't see Xiaoxian's movements clearly, but he felt that Xiaoxian must have found something. Or in other words, Xiaoxian already had a target. Was it that universal eye? No, it wasn't. The direction that Xiaoxian was chasing after the universal eye was very far away from it. The direction wasn't right, so it couldn't be that universal eye. Then did Xiaoxian find another universal eye? That wasn't right either. From what he saw just now, Xiaoxian also missed the other universal eyes. What was Xiaoxian chasing after? Because he didn't understand, the Jing shaman couldn't sit still anymore. He wanted to follow and see. Seeing the Jing shaman stand up, and hearing that the Yinjiao person was about to start catching ground eyes, the Jing people immediately became interested. They all followed behind the Jing shaman, wanting to see if that Yinjiao person could successfully catch the ground eyes. After Xiaoxian took a few deep breaths, he sank to the bottom of the quagmire. This time, without the rope pulling him, he didn't have to worry about going to the center of the quagmire. So he sped up. The night was getting darker. Outside the quagmire, it was as bright as day because of the moon. Everything on the ground could be seen clearly. More and more ground eyes appeared in the quagmire. The bright moon hung high in the sky, and they all seemed very excited. The people standing by the quagmire could see some ground eyes jumping out of the water. Because of their fast-spinning bodies, they threw mud onto the shore. Many people were splashed with bits of mud. It would be great if we had a net with a long handle, Duoli said. We have nets, but without the Jing shaman's permission, no one in the Jing tribe dares to do anything. Tuo pointed at the Jing people behind him with his mouth. Duoli looked over. As expected, many Jing people were eager to try, but they didn't dare to move without permission. Even if you have a net with a long handle, you won't be able to catch them. They're too fast, Wei said. The ground eyes that jumped out of the quagmire didn't jump high, but they were fast. They almost all disappeared in a flash, leaving behind splashes of mud. Duo Li and the others were about to say something, but Wei suddenly said, Stop talking, follow them. On the other side, the Jing shaman had already started running. It was obvious that the people at the bottom of the quagmire had also started moving. They couldn't see what was going on under the quagmire. After the Xiaoxian went down, they couldn't even sense the Xiaoxian's aura. If they were on the shore, they could only determine the Xiaoxian's position based on the movements of the Jing shaman. Therefore, these people who couldn't see what was going on under the quagmire could only follow the shaman. Soon, there were obvious movements in the quagmire. This was because the people at the bottom of the quagmire were moving quickly, causing the mud to move with them. Running in the quagmire wasn't as convenient as running on the ground. Sometimes it even felt a little powerless. It wasn't as effective as running on the ground. However, after running one lap around the quagmire, the Xiaoxian also got the hang of it. He started to speed up from the second lap. Outside the quagmire, the Yinjiao people and the Jing people followed the Jing shaman and ran one lap around the quagmire. Then the second lap, the third lap. The eye between the Jing shaman's eyebrows was wide open, as if he was staring at something with all his might. The veins on his forehead bulged because he was staring too hard. The expression on his face became more and more complicated, more and more conflicted. After running the fourth lap around the quagmire with the shaman, some people couldn't hold it in anymore, especially the Yinjiao people. They looked at the Jing shaman with resentment. Three-eyed shaman, at least explain something. Can't you use your third eye to see what's going on under the quagmire? Can't you say something more? Why are you frowning and pretending to be deep? If the Jing shaman knew what everyone was thinking, he would definitely cry out for injustice. Because he couldn't understand what Xiaoxian was chasing. He could only see that Xiaoxian was chasing after something, but he couldn't tell what it was. There were indeed many ground eyes in the direction that Xiaoxian was chasing, but most of them were just ground eyes that contained ground eye stones. The Jing shaman thought that Xiaoxian would attack the universal eyes that were very close to him, but Xiaoxian ran in another direction, completely ignoring the universal eyes that were making noise. What was it? What was he chasing? Was there something that he couldn't see with his third eye? The Jing shaman was puzzled. It shouldn't be. While the Jing shaman was in a dilemma, in the Jing shaman's house, Miao also opened his third eye and looked at the quagmire. He couldn't go out and run, so he couldn't see everything. In the beginning, Miao was the same as the Jing shaman. He didn't understand what Xiaoxian was chasing, but after the second and third lap, Miao's face became more and more confused. He saw what Xiaoxian was chasing, but he wasn't sure what it was. Chapter 664. At the bottom of the swamp, Xiaoxian stared at the light spot. His totemic power surged crazily, and the muscles in his legs suddenly expanded. His body sank as he bent his legs, and then he rushed out quickly. His whole body was like a loach swimming in the mud at high speed, sliding towards his target. The mud in the quagmire vibrated and surged up. The people outside the quagmire could only see that the quagmire was constantly surging, as if it was boiling, emitting a gurgling sound. The shaman, who could see Xiaoxian's movements at the bottom of the quagmire with his third eye, saw this scene and his face twitched. He had never seen anyone run like this in the quagmire. The quagmire was not like the ground. Although there was a pulling force in the quagmire that pulled people to the bottom, it was still not as convenient as on the ground. Even when he rushed out, there was still a delay in his descent. This was something that could not be changed. Because Xiaoxian knew this, he did not run in the quagmire. Instead, he leapt and sprinted. Every time he leapt, he would bend his leg to land on the bottom of the quagmire. Then, he would use the momentum to propel himself forward at high speed. Every time he leapt, he would cover a distance of more than 10 meters. As Xiao Xian familiarized himself with this method, he became even faster. 10 meters, 15 meters, 20 meters. Every time he rushed out, the distance he covered in the mud would increase. The quagmire churned more and more violently with Xiao Xian's movements at the bottom of the quagmire. The shaman, who was still running at the edge of the quagmire, was sweating profusely. He really did not know how that kid could run so fast in the quagmire. He was like a fish in the water. If one only looked at Xiao Xian's movements, they would not think that he was moving in a quagmire. Moreover, it was close to the fire seat of a foreign tribe. His movements did not seem to be affected at all. This was unbelievable. When the shaman agreed to let Xiao Xian go down, he never thought that he would encounter such a situation. He thought that the kid was just curious and wanted to take a walk in the quagmire. The current situation was completely out of his expectations. Looking at how fast the kid was chasing, it was impossible for him to get to the shore. The Jing shaman quickly wiped the sweat off his forehead and continued to run. Even though he was tired of running, he was more conflicted than anything else. What was that brat chasing after? He couldn't tell. He still couldn't tell. At this time, Xiao Xian's every step caused the thick mud at the bottom of the swamp to vibrate violently. Many ground eyes no longer stayed at the bottom of the swamp in order to avoid the vibrations, and instead swam to the surface of the swamp. As a result, the people standing outside the quagmire noticed that more and more ground eyes were surging out of the water. Dong! With a muffled sound, the mud in the quagmire began to churn again, as if someone was stirring it. The surface of the muddy water became even more turbid and viscous as it surged in one direction. Dong! 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 Muffled sounds rang out one after another. Every sound was the sound of Xiao Xian taking a step forward. They were all produced when he stepped on the bottom of the pool. On the other side of the quagmire outside the Jing tribe, Deepai and Deepa of the Ya tribe had just run over to watch the Jing people catch the ground eyes when they heard the sounds coming from the center of the quagmire. Deepai and Deepa looked away from the people who were busy catching the ground eyes. Their ears twitched along with the vibrations coming from the ground. They tried to distinguish the source of the sound and the exact location of the vibrations. It wasn't coming from the ground. Who was it? This sound didn't sound like something the Jing people could make. The Jing people didn't have that much strength. The two of them were confused, but they still walked towards the center of the quagmire. Because the Jing people were very familiar with the Deepai and Deepa brothers, they didn't stop them when they saw them walking towards the center of the quagmire. However, the two brothers didn't get too close to the quagmire. The Jing fire seed's repulsion made them feel very uncomfortable. The closer they got, the more uncomfortable they felt. That was why they only stopped when they got a little closer to the quagmire. They squinted their eyes, trying to see what was going on over there. Unfortunately, their vision wasn't good enough, so they could only guess what was going on over there from the sounds. There are Yinjiao people over there. What are they doing? They could only feel a group of Yinjiao people and a group of Jing people running around the quagmire like idiots. They didn't know what they were doing, but the quagmire was also very noisy. What's down there? The Deepai and Deepa brothers put their ears to the ground and felt the vibrations coming from the ground. Every time there was a vibration, their ears would twitch quickly. The beards and hair on their faces would spread out like needles, sensing every tiny vibration in the air and ground. In the quagmire, the Xiao Xian stepped on the stairs again and popped his head out to take a breath. This time, the Jing shaman took the opportunity and asked, "What did you see?" "There's a ground eye. I feel like it's looking at me." "You said it before, the true eye is like an eye. It gives people a different feeling from other ground eyes." Before the Xiao Xian could finish, the Jing shaman interrupted him. "It can't be the true eye. If it was the true eye, he would have seen it a long time ago. There was no way he couldn't see it until now. You can't even see the true eye. Do you think I'm blind? Do you think I'm from the Ya tribe?" The Jing shaman didn't believe the Xiao Xian. If there was a true eye, it wouldn't be able to escape his third eye. The Xiao Xian didn't care and continued. "You also said that the higher the level of the ground eye, the faster it can move in the quagmire. That ground eye is faster than the universal eye." "Impossible." The Jing shaman denied again. He didn't see a single ground eye moving quickly in the quagmire. Not to mention the universal eye, he didn't even see a normal ground eye. There were so many ground eyes in the quagmire. If there was one moving at high speed, how could he miss it? Just as he was about to say something, the Jing shaman suddenly heard a low cough from the house. This place wasn't far from the house. The Jing shaman remembered that Mio was still in the house. He must have seen what happened just now. But why did he cough like that? Ever since Mio's injuries recovered, he never coughed again. Did Mio discover something and wanted to remind him? Because of Mio's low cough, the Jing shaman swallowed the words he was about to say. He changed the topic and said, "If it really is the true eye, you won't be able to catch it. Only I can catch it." The Jing shaman pointed at his third eye. Catching the true eye is actually a competition of eyes. Even in the past, when the Jing people caught the true eye, it was with the help of the shaman. You can't do it. Even if you use a net, you won't be able to catch the true eye. You can't compete with it in terms of speed. How about this? Let me rest for a while. Then I'll go down and catch it with you. The Xiaoxian thought for a while and nodded. Then you rest first. I'll try again. If it doesn't work, then we'll discuss how to work together. The Jing shaman wanted to go to the house and ask Mio what he found, but the Xiaoxian had already sunk to the bottom of the quagmire. The Jing shaman could only look at the quagmire again. This time, he wanted to take a good look at the ground eye moving quickly in the quagmire. When the Xiaoxian sank to the bottom of the quagmire, the ground eye was quietly watching him from afar, but the Jing shaman couldn't see it. The Xiaoxian thought about the few times he chased the ground eye. The quagmire didn't pose much of a hindrance to the ground eye. Instead, it helped them move faster in the quagmire. Every time, he almost caught up with the ground eye, but the distance between them was enough for the ground eye to widen again. After all, the ground eyes that lived underground and in the quagmire didn't need to come out of the water to breathe, but the Xiaoxian needed to. Even though totemic warriors could hold their breath for longer than normal people, the intense consumption of energy would shorten this time. The Jing shaman couldn't see it, but the Xiaoxian had been chasing it for so long. In fact, he was 80% sure that it was the ground eye. The Jing shaman had said that it wasn't easy for the true eye to appear. If he was wrong, he might have to wait even longer. Naturally, the Xiaoxian wouldn't let go of this opportunity so easily. Even if it was proven that it wasn't the true eye, the Xiaoxian still wanted to try. It was better than missing it and regretting it later. Using a net wouldn't work, and speed wouldn't work either. Then he changed his method. The Jing shaman saw that the Xiaoxian was using the same method again to chase in a certain direction. He quickly opened his eyes wide and looked in that direction. He couldn't help but stand up and follow in that direction. While he was looking for his target with his eyes wide open, the Jing shaman was still complaining in his heart. It was the same old trick again. Even if there really was the true eye, using this method wouldn't work. It would just be a waste of energy. The muffled thumping sounds came from the bottom of the pool, and the quagmire surged again. The people who saw this were the same as the Jing shaman. They thought that what happened next would be the same as before, but they soon realized that they were wrong. The Xiaoxian was indeed using the leaping method to chase, but as he got closer and closer to the light spot, he was about to reach the surface of the pool to take a breath. Every time he was the closest to the target, he would suddenly rush towards the stairs at the bottom of the pool. His leg, which had accumulated power, kicked hard at the bottom of the pool, making a thumping sound. His body broke through the mud and pushed forward. When he reached the stairs, his other leg landed on the stairs. However, just as the Jing shaman thought that Xiaoxian was going to step on the stairs to take a breath, the Xiaoxian didn't stop. Instead, he suddenly stepped on the stairs. Thump! Another muffled sound rang out. It was even more muffled than the previous few times, like a heavy hammer hitting the ground. Everyone who heard this sound felt their hearts tremble. At the bottom of the pool, the stone stairs at the bottom of the pool that Xiaoxian had stepped on sank. Large amounts of mud rose up from the vibrations. Xiaoxian's rapidly advancing figure was like a battle knife cutting through the mud. A series of bubbles appeared behind him, because he was moving too quickly, making popping sounds. However, Xiaoxian didn't rush towards the target like before. Although he was still facing the target, His body was slanted upwards. At the same time, he raised his arm, clenched his fist and swung his arm. The moment his head emerged from the mud, Xiaoxian's raised arm brought up the mud in the quagmire. It was like the dorsal fin of a ferocious shark in the sea. The Jing shaman's eyelids twitched. He had a feeling that something bad was going to happen. Thump! Xiaoxian's raised arm turned into a heavy hammer at this moment and slammed it onto the surface of the pool. A powerful force instantly broke open the surface of the pool. Where Xiaoxian's arm landed, the vibration split the water and broke the waves. The mud was pushed away, and ripples spread in all directions, forming a rapidly expanding depression. The mud was like a blooming black lotus, tumbling and exploding. The mud at the bottom of the pool was sent flying by the vibrations, splashing out of the surface of the pool. Many of the ground eyes that were swimming on the surface of the quagmire were also blown out of the water. The wet mud was flung out by the ground eyes that were sent flying, sweeping towards the shore like raindrops. Chapter 665. The sudden loud noise not only scared the people who were staring at the quagmire, but the two brothers, Di Pai and Di Pa, who were originally sticking close to the ground to listen to the noise, were so scared that they jumped up. Their short and fat bodies rolled back a few times before they stopped. After they stopped, their first reaction was to dig a hole and bury themselves underground. Scary. Too scary. They just wanted to watch the show. How could they encounter something so scary? The two brothers of the Ya tribe were completely shocked by the vibrations and sounds coming from the ground and air. Although they didn't know what happened, this kind of noise was enough to scare them. It was better to dig a hole and bury themselves underground. Hiding underground was safer than on the surface. Beside the quagmire, the black waves of mud crashed down on the people who were already stunned on the shore. The water splashed onto them, and the mud rushed into their open mouths. The Jing people looked at the huge hole in the quagmire. It was as if a large piece of the quagmire was suddenly dug out by a big spoon. Violent. Too violent. Although the mud around the hole quickly filled up the hole after it stopped expanding, the Jing people who were watching from the side were still traumatized by this scene. From now on, the Jing people's impression of the Yinjiao people would probably stop at the scene where a Yinjiao person created a huge hole in their central quagmire. The active ground eyes in the quagmire were thrown into the air by the waves of mud, and then they all fell back into the quagmire. Before one of the ground eyes fell into the quagmire, a hand suddenly reached out from the quagmire and caught the falling ground eye. The moment it was caught, the ground eye was still spinning. The straw rope tied to the hand squeezed off the mud as it spun. It even created sparks as if it was burning. But in the next moment, the hand and the ground eye both fell into the quagmire. The sparks created by the friction between the hand and the ground eye were extinguished in the mud. The splashing sound of the mud gradually subsided. The ground eyes that were supposed to be active tonight suddenly calmed down. No one knew if it was because they were scared or because they fainted from the impact just now. Under the silver plate hanging high in the sky, the moonlight illuminated everything on the ground very clearly. After everything stopped, the mud in the quagmire stopped churning violently. What happened? The confused crowd looked at the shaman and saw that the shaman was looking in one direction. That was where Xiaoxian had entered the quagmire. There was a gentle slope that extended downwards from the shore. Xiaoxian had walked down from there. Whoosh whoosh, the sound of water came from the quagmire. The surface of the quagmire that had just settled down rippled. Obviously, someone was approaching from below. A man covered in mud poked his head out of the water. That Yinjiao guy is coming out. What did he do just now? Look at his hand. As Xiaoxian slowly walked out of the slope, half of his body emerged from the quagmire. His hands were hanging by his side, one of them holding a shuttle-shaped object. It's a ground eye. What kind of ground eye is that? It's quite big, but I can't tell what kind it is. Even the experienced Jing people couldn't come to a definite conclusion. They just stared at the ground eye in Xiaoxian's hand, then looked at the shaman, waiting for his evaluation. The shaman's face was frozen. Just now, Xiaoxian had created a big hole in the quagmire. His heart was still beating violently. When he grabbed the ground eye just now, He almost thought that Xiao Xian was going to destroy their fire seed. Before he could shout stop, the quagmire returned to normal. Seeing that Xiao Xian didn't do anything else, and seemed like he was going to come out of the quagmire, the shaman let out a sigh of relief. But when he saw Xiao Xian walk out of the quagmire, his sigh was stuck in his throat again. The shaman's 3 eyes stared at the ground eye in Xiao Xian's hand. To be honest, there was nothing special about this ground eye. He had caught a lot of special-looking ground eyes in his years as a shaman, but this one made him react so strongly, because he didn't see it with his 3rd eye before it came out of the quagmire. The shaman saw Xiao Xian walking, but he didn't see what Xiao Xian was holding until the ground eye appeared, as Xiao Xian walked out of the quagmire. Shocked disbelief. The shaman even suspected that there was something wrong with his 3rd eye. How could he not see it? Thinking back to what Xiao Xian said before, he thought that the ground eye that was faster than the universal eyes must be this one. Could it be that he was really blind? He must have been infected by the people. The shaman started doubting himself. Until now, he still couldn't see what was different about this ground eye. Miao, who was originally in the house, was helped out. He also wanted to see if the ground eye Xiao Xian caught was the true eye. Grand Elder, what kind of ground eye did you catch? Kuan Tu and the others surrounded them. I think it has to be at least the universal eyes. Tua said. Brother Xian, hurry up and cut it open. Guang and Duo Li urged him. Xiao Xian didn't have the experience, so he walked in front of the shaman and said, Please cut it open and see if it's the true eye. Oh. The Jing shaman snapped out of his self-doubt and asked someone to fetch some tools from the house. He also asked someone to fetch a basin of water. He carefully took the ground eye that Xiao Xian passed to him. The moment he turned his hand, the ground eye suddenly started spinning again. Luckily, the shaman was experienced. He grabbed it tightly with the rope wrapped around his hand and didn't give it a chance to escape. This kind of spinning was stronger than the universal eyes. The shaman felt the strength in his hand, and his heart started to move towards Xiao Xian's guess. The knife used to cut open ground eyes was made from animal horns. It was definitely not as sharp as the weapons in Xiao Xian's hands, but the Jing people had been using their own tools for a long time, and were used to it. Plus, this knife was specially made for cutting open ground eyes. It could be cut along the threads on the ground eye's shell, so the shaman didn't take the knife Xiao Xian passed to him. He washed the ground eye in clean water. After washing it, the ground eye was no longer covered in mud, so it started spinning much slower. The shaman held the ground eye in one hand, and the knife in the other. He measured the ground eye's body with the knife, then cut into the middle of the ground eye. The shaman used a lot of strength, and his movements were fast. With one cut, a small crack appeared near the center of the ground eye. With the second cut, he could see the white meat inside. Compared to the gray outer shell, the meat inside the ground eye was unbelievably white. Under the moonlight, it shone brightly. After the second cut, the shaman took a deep breath. The people around him also became nervous. The third cut would reveal the truth, whether it was the ground eye stone, the universal eyes, or the true eye that Xiao Xian had been longing for. There would be an answer. The Xiao Xian stared at the knife in the shaman's hand without blinking. With the third cut, the white meat was cut open, revealing the core of the ground eye. The shaman's hand paused. The Xiao Xian looked over. In the meat that was cut open there was no round bead. No matter what kind of ground eye stone it was definitely not the color of the ground eye meat. However, there was no ground eye stone. Instead, there was a small round ball wrapped in white ground eye meat. The ground eye meat wrapped around the ball showed signs of hardening, so it was not cut open by the shaman's third cut. What is this? The shaman had never seen anything like this before. He frowned and looked at the Xiao Xian. Continue. Cut it open and see what's inside, the Xiao Xian said. When they were at the bottom of the quagmire, it was the wrapped bead that had shown. The shaman was even more careful this time. He cut open the hard meat wrapped around the ball bit by bit until a trace of black was revealed. True eye. The shaman almost shouted. He could only see it now. It was as if the meat wrapped around the ground eye stone had blocked the vision of his third eye, so he could not see the true face of the ground eye. The moment the shaman spoke, the onlookers burst into an uproar. It's the true eye. The shaman said, "It's the true eye. I can't believe he actually caught it." The people who were catching ground eyes in the outer quagmire heard the shouts. They put down what they were doing and ran over. It was rare to hear about someone catching a true eye. Sometimes it might not even be seen for a few years. Of course, they had to take a good look. Seeing that more and more people were gathering around, the shaman waved his hand impatiently to chase them away. He thought of something and said 10 names. "It's you guys this year. You can enter the quagmire in the center tonight to catch ground eyes." The 10 people who were named were overjoyed. They were not in a hurry to look at the true eye. They hurried back to prepare their equipment for the quagmire. Who knew, they might be able to catch something good. The shaman asked the Xiaoxian to go to the house to talk. It was too noisy here. When he went over, the shaman was still thinking about how such a situation could happen. However, with Mio's previous example, the shaman quickly calmed down. It should not be a problem with his eyes. There were too many types of true eyes. Perhaps he could only see a part of it. After entering the house, the shaman continued to dissect the ground eye that he had not finished dissecting. The true eye that he dissected was a pure black bead. It did not have the pupil like the ground eye stone, nor did it have the pointing function of the universal eye. It looked just like a black stone. "This is the true eye?" the Xiaoxian asked. It looked too normal and too small. The universal eye and the ground eye stone were at least the size of a quail egg. The one in front of him was not even a third of the size of the other two. Not bad. Why? Don't you think it looks like it? You'll know when it's time to merge. The shaman inspected the true eye that he had dissected and put it back into the ground eye meat. He then closed the outer shell of the ground eye and tied it with a rope to prevent the meat inside from showing through the cracks. After tying it up, the shaman put it into a large bamboo tube filled with mud. It will last longer if you put it in here. However, I still advise you to use it as much as possible. If you drag it out for too long, it will affect the merging process, the shaman said. The Xiaoxian agreed. He would have more chances in the future. But if he missed out on Caesar's eye this time, he did not know when he would have another chance. After all, the shaman said that it was hard to find a true eye. If the ground eye was not active during normal times, even a universal eye would be hard to find. Even if the ground eye was preserved using the Jing tribe's method, the temperature was too high right now. He did not know how long it would last. It was better to go back as soon as possible. The Xiaoxian asked the shaman about some things he needed to pay attention to, such as how to install the true eye on a human or beast that had lost an eye, and whether he needed any medicine to help. You don't need anything else. Just feed the ground eye meat to it. It might help with the merging process. Speaking of which, I only made a small opening between my eyebrows and put the true eye there, and it merged. Speaking of this, the shaman was quite proud. He was one of the few people who managed to merge successfully. He was very talented. However, some people have a strong reaction. You can do whatever you want. If that person, that wolf, has a strong reaction, or even bleeds too much, stop the merging process. Even if you put the true eye in, you have to dig it out. The shaman looked at the Xiaoxian seriously and reminded him again. Some things cannot be forced. I understand, the Xiaoxian said seriously. Chapter 666. The Xiaoxian recorded everything the shaman said he needed to pay attention to. Installing an eye was different from other things, so he couldn't miss out on any details. The shaman was patient too. He told Xiaoxian everything he could. If it was related to the Jing tribe's secrets, he was even more vague. The Xiaoxian already knew that the shaman was different from the other Jing people. His way of thinking was different from the traditional Jing people, but he did it for the sake of the Jing tribe. He could use this information to exchange for more things with the Xiaoxian. Looking out of the window, the central quagmire was bustling with noise and excitement. There were many people watching. Although only 10 people went into the quagmire, there were many people helping. Some were cheering, and some were just watching. Most of the people from the tribe were gathered here. There were also the tribesmen who rushed over to watch. Duo Li and the others were also there to join in the fun. The people who went into the quagmire gained a lot tonight. They didn't have the shaman's third eye, nor did they have Xiaoxian's special vision. They could only use nets, or their intuition to catch things. Even if they didn't have the third eye, they could still feel some things in the quagmire. Ah, it's the universal pupil! Someone in the crowd exclaimed. Who? Who caught the universal pupil? The people who were watching from other places rushed over. Not long after, someone shouted from the other side of the quagmire. Another one! What? Who caught it this time? The crowd rushed over again. 30 already? Haha, let's see who can catch more than me today. A Jing warrior who had just been pulled out of the quagmire laughed loudly. They already gained so much in such a short time. How many would they be able to catch tonight? Just thinking about it made his mouth split open. I don't know why, but the ground eyes in the quagmire are especially easy to catch today. Many of them aren't moving, someone sighed. The shaman in the house heard this, and his face twitched. Many of the ground eyes couldn't move, probably because they were scared. The pit that the Xiaoxian made shocked many of them. Even if they didn't die, they were half dead. At least, they wouldn't be able to recover tonight. Those who went into the quagmire had to thank Xiaoxian for their great harvest tonight. It was a bargain. The Jing shaman smiled helplessly and shook his head. These kids probably hadn't encountered such a good thing in a long time. They were all crazy with joy. Are you sure you don't want to trade the ground eye stones? Xiaoxian asked. The Jing people had a lot of stock in their hands. Even if they didn't harvest much every year, after generations of accumulation, the amount was already frightening. But did they plan to keep all of this? That depends on what everyone thinks. The Jing shaman did not comment. Even though he had a different way of thinking, and did not intend to change everyone's way of thinking, he would not stop them if they were willing to exchange what they had in their hands for resources to survive. Xiaoxian rolled up the animal skin scroll and put it away. He thought for a moment and said, I have another question. Go ahead. The Jing shaman thought that Xiaoxian had suddenly thought of something related to the fusion of the true eye. Xiaoxian looked at the Jing shaman and asked, What do you see on my body? The Jing shaman stopped playing with the ground eye stones. He didn't expect Xiaoxian to ask this question, but he did notice it. After thinking for a while, the Jing shaman said, A human figure. I saw a human figure behind you. The Jing shaman didn't plan to tell Xiaoxian this at first. The ancestors of the Jing tribe had warned their descendants that even if they saw something that others couldn't, they shouldn't speak carelessly. It was easy to get into trouble. It was said that a long time ago, there were shamans in the Jing tribe who used their ability to see things that others couldn't see to get into trouble. That was why the Jing shaman stopped Miao when he noticed the abnormality on Xiaoxian's body. He was worried that Miao would get into trouble if he spoke carelessly. But now that Xiaoxian asked, even if the Jing shaman wanted to hide it, he couldn't. Plus, the Jing shaman felt that Xiaoxian wouldn't cause them any trouble. Even if Xiaoxian was mentally prepared, he was still stunned when he heard this. What did the figure look like? The Jing shaman shook his head. I don't know. I only saw a blurry figure, but I don't know what it looked like. It must be one of Yinjiao's ancestors. It really was one of Yinjiao's ancestors? Xiaoxian was extremely shocked. He had told the drumming shaman this excuse before, but at that time, he only used one of his ancestors as an excuse. But now that he heard the Jing shaman's words, did he really get it right? But why was one of his ancestors following him? Which ancestor was it? There were many ancestors in Yinjiao's history. Thinking about the bone ornament necklace, Xiaoxian analyzed the possibility of it being a first shaman. After a moment of silence, Xiaoxian shook his head. If he couldn't figure it out, then he wouldn't think about it. He would think about it when he had other clues in the future. Xiaoxian gave the Jing shaman a palm-sized token made of green bronze. There were Yinjiao totem patterns on it, and the word Xian on the other side. In Yinjiao, only the current shaman and chief, as well as Xiaoxian, the great elder, could have such a token. If the Jing tribe wanted to trade with ground eye stones in the future, they could bring this token to the Flaming River trading point. When people with this token went to the Flaming River trading point, they would naturally be treated better than others. There would also be people protecting them. Before they left, Xiaoxian also gave the Jing shaman some extra beast hides as a reward for his last question. When they left, The Jing shaman even brought the Jing tribesmen to the riverbank to send them off. There was a stone tablet with the words Flaming River on it. From now on, the Jing tribesmen would know what the river in front of their tribe was called. They also knew that if they followed the Flaming River upstream, they would be able to find the Yinjiao tribe. What kind of tribe was the Yinjiao tribe? The Jing tribesmen's impression of the Yinjiao tribe was that they had big boats that were bigger than houses, sharp weapons, thick beast hides, and a lot of strength. They were not as fierce as the Yi tribesmen were rumored to be, although they were sometimes quite scary. After bidding farewell to the Jing tribe, the Xiaoxian took the map that he had drawn and turned the boat around to head upstream. The trip downstream took less time than the Xiaoxian expected, but the harvest was not bad. The most important thing was that they managed to get the true eye. All they had to do was wait for Caesar to try it out. When they traveled upstream, it was much faster than when they came out. They didn't have to go to the riverbank to put up a stone tablet. Also, after the full moon, the flow of the river would change. Even though the river had disappeared, some of the phenomena still existed. For example, before the full moon, the river would flow faster downstream than usual. The river level would not drop much, but if you looked closely, you would notice that the drop was very obvious. After the full moon, the river would flow back, which made it easier for Xiaoxian and the others to go back. Along the way, Xiaoxian and the others went to the drumming tribe to take a look. The tribe had already been rebuilt. The houses were all built. The tribe had recovered quite well. When Xiaoxian and the others were about to reach the tribe, they saw the crocodiles that had left during the rainy season returning in groups. Even though the river was gone, their habits were still there. It was just that they were slower in coming back. The drumming tribe has a lot of water moonstones again, Xiaoxian said as he looked at the groups of crocodiles swimming upstream. He also saw the familiar mute crocodile, and threw some freshly hunted meat to them. Even though most of the crocodiles in the drumming tribe were not fearsome beasts, there were a lot of them. They were also considered strong beasts. If they swam in groups like this, there wouldn't be much trouble. The group of crocodiles was faster than Xiaoxian's boat, so they arrived at the drumming tribe first. Xiaoxian and the others arrived 3 days later. Nothing major happened in the tribe while Xiaoxian and the others were away. It was the same at the Flaming River trading point, or at least it seemed that way. After returning to the tribe, the first thing Xiaoxian wanted to do was to install an eye for Caesar. After not seeing him for a while, Caesar's body had new injuries. Everyone was already used to this. Xiaoxian took out the bamboo tube that the shaman used to install the true eye and shook it in front of Caesar. Give it a try. Chapter 667. Caesar was originally an ordinary wolf, brought back by Lang Jie to be Xiaoxian's food. However, Xiaoxian didn't eat it and raised it instead. Speaking of which, Caesar didn't have a strong bloodline like Cha-Cha. It was completely transformed into a ferocious beast by Xiaoxian. Now Caesar didn't have an eye, so Xiaoxian tried to install an eye for him. He wasn't sure if it would succeed, but he could only try. Xiaoxian took Caesar to a remote mountain at the edge of the tribe's territory. The soil there wasn't suitable for planting, and the stone wasn't good enough to make weapons. There weren't any wanderers living there, and only some patrolling warriors would rest there. When Xiaoxian arrived, there was a group of patrolling warriors resting there. When they saw Xiaoxian, they hurriedly greeted him. When they heard that Xiaoxian had something to do here, they didn't say anything and hurried down the mountain. However, they didn't go far, but stood guard at a distance to prevent others from disturbing them. Caesar still had doubts in his eyes. Although he could understand a lot of words, Xiaoxian didn't say much before, so he was still confused. Today there was a hunting team out, but he didn't go with them. Xiaoxian took out the animal skin roll that recorded the precautions, and read it again from beginning to end. Although he had read this animal skin roll several times on the way back, he still read it again before he started, and simulated the next steps in his mind. Okay, come here and lie down, Xiaoxian called Caesar. Caesar was already very big now. When he lay down, his back was almost the same height as a human, let alone when he stood up. Now that Xiaoxian wanted to install an eye for him, of course he had to lie down. He didn't understand what Xiao Xian wanted to do, but Caesar still lay down obediently and rested his head on the ground between his two front paws. Xiao Xian removed the blindfold on Caesar's right eye. There was no eyeball inside, and the eyelid was slightly sunken. Caesar's upper and lower eyelids were always closed. The injuries from back then had already healed, and all the new injuries were from hunting. However, his right eye was protected by the blindfold, so it wasn't scratched. Caesar, this is the true eye from the Jing tribe. The Jing people can use this to grow another eye. Xiao Xian pointed at the bamboo tube in his hand. Caesar's ears twitched as he looked at the bamboo tube expectantly. But I don't know if it will work. People from different tribes can't use it. You're a fearsome beast, not a human, so you don't fall under this category. However, you've been marked before, so you have the aura of the Yinjiao fire seed. This is a little risky, but we still have to try. If it doesn't work, then forget it. Back then, Caesar was personally marked by Xiao Xian with the power of the Yinjiao totem. Caesar had been in the tribe for so many years and participated in every ritual, so he naturally absorbed some of the power of the fire seed. This was what Xiao Xian was worried about. The more power he had, the more obvious the rejection would be, and the lower the success rate. He had to give it a try. With a sigh, Xiao Xian opened the bamboo tube and took out the ground eye sealed in mud. Just as the shaman had said, the meat of the ground eye wouldn't spoil easily if it was sealed in mud. Xiao Xian washed away the mud and untied the rope on top. When he opened the shell of the ground eye, the meat was still the same as when Xiao Xian saw it. There were no changes. He took out the meat of the ground eye, broke it open, and took out the true eye. After washing the meat, Xiao Xian cut some and passed it to Caesar. Eat this first. Caesar sniffed it curiously, then opened his mouth and ate it. Xiao Xian observed for a while, and didn't see anything strange with Caesar. Only then did he let him eat the rest. After Caesar ate the entire ground eye meat, Xiao Xian slightly pried open the eyelid of Caesar's right eye, where there was no eyeball. Where there was no eyeball, there was only some red flesh. Unlike the shaman who had a third eye in between his eyebrows, Caesar didn't have to make an opening. Xiao Xian fixed Caesar's right eyelid with one hand and held the black true eye with the other. He carefully placed it there and pushed it in slightly. Xiao Xian didn't dare to push it too far. If the rejection from the true eye was too strong, it would be like what the shaman had said. He would have to dig it out again. After Xiao Xian placed the true eye into Caesar's right eye, the black true eye's surroundings began to change after about 2 breaths. The flesh around Caesar's right eye started to close in on the black true eye. Thin blood vessels covered most of the true eye. Other than the part that was facing the outside, the rest of the true eye was covered in blood vessels. Then, a layer of white membrane appeared where the blood vessels covered. Not long after, it began to swell. Ayo! Caesar shook his head in discomfort. Xiao Xian released his hand and asked, "How is it?" The true eye had already begun to change. It should be working, right? Caesar only felt a little uncomfortable. From time to time, he wanted to use his forelimbs to push his eyes out, but Xiao Xian stopped him. Xiao Xian noticed that Caesar's closed right eye had begun to bulge. Caesar wanted to rub his head against the ground, but Xiao Xian stopped him. If that was all, it would be fine. Xiao Xian had heard from the shaman about the violent reaction from failed fusion. Caesar's situation didn't seem like he was being strongly rejected by the ground eye. This was a good thing. Caesar probably knew that his right eye was changing. Although he felt uncomfortable, he tried his best to endure it. He only struggled a little when he couldn't help it, but Xiao Xian stopped him. Some mud-like liquid flowed out from Caesar's right eye. Xiao Xian frowned, but when he looked at Caesar, he didn't see any violent reaction. So he didn't do anything. If Caesar suddenly struggled violently, he would have to consider forcefully pulling the true eye out. The shaman had mentioned this before. Some people in the Jing tribe would experience this when they fused, so it wasn't strange. The mud-like liquid dripped onto the ground and gradually seeped into the soil. The grass that was originally growing there withered at a speed visible to the naked eye. The upright stalks of grass bent, and the entire plant fell down. Xiao Xian saw this and frowned even more. This was obviously not a normal tear. The shaman didn't mention this before. Since there weren't many grass in the Jing tribe, it was understandable that the shaman didn't mention this. The mud-like liquid kept flowing out from Caesar's right eye, but the color gradually faded until it was as transparent as a normal tear. The transparent liquid that dripped onto the ground didn't have the same effect on the grass as before. Xiao Xian let out a sigh of relief. It seemed like things were going in a good direction. Even so, Xiao Xian didn't dare to be careless. After all, just like the shaman said, he had never heard of anyone putting a true eye on a fearsome beast, let alone one that had been branded. Before the process ended, he couldn't be careless. The tear-like liquid in Caesar's right eye gradually stopped flowing down. The bulging eyelid also slowly shrank down. It wasn't that obvious anymore. Xiao Xian looked at Caesar's perfectly fine left eye, then looked at his right eye. Both sides were almost the same. They weren't sunken or bulging. Xiao Xian wanted to pry open Caesar's right eye to see how the true eye had changed, but the fusion wasn't over yet. Xiao Xian didn't dare to move recklessly. If he interfered with the fusion, all his efforts would be in vain. After another half an hour, Caesar suddenly shook and began to struggle violently. It's starting to reject. Xiao Xian stared intently at Caesar's reaction. If the rejection intensified, he would take action and dig the true eye out. Although it would hurt Caesar, under the strong rejection of the true eye, the longer it dragged on, the greater the damage Caesar would suffer. It might even put his life in danger. This was what the shaman had warned Xiao Xian before. Just as Xiao Xian was about to take action, Caesar stopped struggling. The eyelid in his right eye moved, as if he was trying to open his eye. After losing his right eye, Caesar couldn't even move his eyelid, let alone open his eye. Now that he was trying to open his eye, it was already a huge improvement. After opening it a few times, the eyelid finally opened slowly. Xiao Xian saw that in Caesar's right eye, there was a white eyeball. There was also a black dot in the middle of the eyeball. The size of the black dot was exactly the same as the true eye. However, compared to the entire eyeball, the black dot in the middle was too small. However, very quickly, Xiao Xian saw that the black dot was surrounded by tightly arranged strands of filaments. Gray-brown extended outwards from the black dot. As for the black dot in the middle, it seemed to be expanding at the same frequency as the heart, due to the stretching of these tightly arranged filaments. Xiao Xian had once wondered how such a small true eye could change. It was much smaller than Caesar's eye. The shaman had told him that the true eye would change according to the fusion. Now, it seemed that this was indeed the case. Caesar's right eye was gradually becoming complete, becoming similar to his left eye. The black pupil in the middle was also expanding at the same time as his left eye. It was done. Looking at Caesar's right eye, which was almost the same as his left eye, Xiao Xian finally relaxed. He waved his fist forcefully. This was smoother than he had expected. Although there were signs of rejection during the fusion, it was not strong. In the end, he succeeded. Caesar seemed to have not gotten used to the sudden improvement of his right eye. After all, he had only had one eye for so long. Now that his field of vision had suddenly expanded, he was a little confused. However, he soon became happy. He stood up and jumped on the spot. Then, he raised his head and howled excitedly. Awoo! At the foot of the mountain, the patrol team heard the howl and looked up in confusion. Caesar's howl sounds very excited. One of the team members said. Caesar is a good wolf. It's a pity that he's blind in one eye. Another person said regretfully. So what if he's blind in one eye? Caesar can still hunt. He's quite powerful, a young warrior said. He was even more powerful when both of his eyes were intact. What a pity. Someone wanted to say something, but when he saw Xiao Xian coming over with Caesar, he immediately stopped talking. Caesar seemed to be particularly excited today. When he walked past the patrol team, he bumped into them. However, he didn't use much strength. For the Yinjiao warriors, that was just playing around. A few of the patrol team bumped into and played with Caesar for a while before they watched Caesar and Xiao Xian leave. What's wrong, boss? The person who had just played with Caesar asked with a smile. He saw the leader standing next to him, staring at the wolf in the distance. Didn't you guys notice? The leader stared straight at the wolf in the distance. Notice what? Caesar's eyes. What's the point of noticing that? It's not good to stare at someone's blind eye. Even if it's a wolf, it won't be happy. Look at Caesar's eyes just now. The person who was speaking suddenly paused. The rest of the team also seemed to be strangled. Not a single word came out of their mouths. Fuck. Chapter 668. Caesar hopped all the way back. The wanderers who were busy working in the fields saw it from afar. It hopped like a rabbit and stopped to look around. If it saw someone familiar, it would howl as if it was greeting them. At first, everyone thought that Caesar was in a good mood because of Xiao Xian's return. But soon, more and more people noticed that Caesar's right eye, which was supposed to be covered with an eye patch and had lost an eyeball, was still intact. There was not a single flaw, and it did not look like a fake. How is this possible? The wanderers who stood in the fields and watched Caesar walk away only regained their senses after a while. Their faces were full of disbelief as they asked their comrades beside them, "Did I see wrongly?" "No, definitely not. I saw it too. Could it be that fearsome beasts can grow their own eyes?" Someone guessed. After all, some fearsome beasts had the ability to regenerate, but they had never heard of a wolf-type fearsome beast with such an ability. Plus, if they could regenerate, why would they wait until now? How long had it been? Caesar brought a new topic of discussion to the tribe. Xiao Xian didn't announce it publicly, because he didn't know if it would succeed. Since it was successful, Xiao Xian explained it to everyone when they went up the mountain for a meeting. The Jing tribe's true eye? Xing didn't even care about his beloved pottery today. He ran over to Xiao Xian to ask about Caesar's eye. The others had the same goal. Even Zheng Luo and Duo Kong, who had been guarding the Flaming River trading point, came over. After all, some warriors in the tribe had lost their eyes too. If they could grow their eyes back like Caesar, it would be very exciting. However, after hearing what Xiao Xian told them about the Jing shaman's words, their eager hearts cooled down. Bloodline, fire seed. These unchangeable factors could cause a strong rejection. If they lost their lives for an eye, it wouldn't be worth it. Some things couldn't be forced. Putting aside the matter of the true eye for the time being, they were very curious about the universal eyes that Xiao Xian had brought back. Although the ground eye stones were beautiful, to most Yinjiao people, especially those who lived here, the ground eye stones were not even as important as a piece of meat. The people from the other side of the sea, on the other hand, were more interested in the ground eye stones. They were more astute and sensitive when it came to trading. They were also the main force in the Flaming River trading point. The universal pupil not only surprised the people who came back from the other side of the sea, but also attracted the attention of the local people. When hunting, if they went to an unfamiliar area and encountered heavy clouds, without any directional tools, they would find a place to wait for the sun to come out, and then identify the direction. But now that they had the universal eyes, they no longer needed to wait for the sky to clear up. This is better than the sunstone. Zheng Luo picked up a universal eye, and carefully observed it in his hand, to see if it was pointing in the right direction. It can distinguish the light of the sun and the moon. This is good stuff. Ao was also excited. The shaman gave them a total of 18 universal eyes. The 5 elders, including Xiao Xian, received 1 each. As the chief and shaman, Gui Zhe and Gigu each received 1. Ta and Duokong each received 1. The remaining 9 were left with Gigu. If anyone wanted to go on a long journey in the future, they could ask him for more. According to the tribe's rules, everyone was a team. Whatever they received would be managed by the same group. Xiao Xian had no intention of monopolizing it. However, since he had received more ground eye stones, he had more say in this matter. Right, the people from the Hui tribe sent us a beast skin scroll today. Zheng Luo took out a beast skin scroll that they had just received, and passed it to Gigu. Gigu's expression darkened after reading it. There are people coming from the other side of the sea. They're finally here? No, there's just some movement. As for who exactly is coming, we're not sure yet. There was a strange movement in the desert. There might have been a conflict, but we don't know the details yet, Gigu said. With the people from Rock Hill City guarding, even if there are people coming, there won't be many, Xiao Xian said. Indeed, there won't be many, but it's still better to be on guard. From now on, increase the patrol area, especially around the Flaming River trading point. No one objected to Gigu's decision. Is there anyone coming from this side? Xiaoxian asked. Gigu passed the beast skin scroll to Xiaoxian. I don't know about the other tribes, but I heard that the robbers are on the move. Every time they mentioned the robbers, they felt so disgusted that they wanted to throw up everything they ate yesterday. They stole people's belongings, and were proud of it instead of being ashamed. It could be said that the robbers were publicly acknowledged by all tribes to be on guard against. However, as the two continents got closer, and there were many good things on the other side of the sea, it was not surprising that the robbers were attracted there. If the robbers went there, their main targets would be the slave masters with large amounts of wealth. Thinking of this, everyone felt quite satisfied. Let the robbers go and annoy the slave masters. It's a good thing for us that the robbers are attracted by the robbers. Zheng Luo smiled gloatingly. Obviously, the others thought so too. No matter what, since there was already movement on the other side, and it had been a year since the disaster, what was to come would come. Although it wouldn't affect the Flaming Horn tribe much in the short term, it was better to be prepared in advance. After the meeting, Xiaoxian went down the mountain. Caesar had just run up and down the mountain like crazy, as if he wanted to let everyone know about his changes. He even ran to a few fearsome beasts in the tribe to show off before going home. Old Ke looked at Caesar's changes, and his old face was full of smiles. It's good that it's grown back. Old Ke thought of something and asked Xiaoxian, Caesar's I won't have any problems in the future, right? From the looks of it, it should be fine for now. The rejection wasn't obvious during the fusion either. According to the Jing shaman, there shouldn't be any problems after the fusion, Xiaoxian answered. It's amazing. They look exactly the same, so there shouldn't be any difference in their vision, right? That depends on Caesar's performance when he hunts in the future. If it was the same as before, there shouldn't be any problems. Although according to the Jing shaman, Caesar's I wouldn't have any problems after the fusion. Caesar's situation was different after all, so he still needed to observe for a few days. With his right eye again, when Caesar went out to hunt for food, the food he brought back was different from when he only had one eye. In the past, he caught some heavy fearsome beasts that were not good at hiding and were not fast. Now he brought back some more difficult to catch prey. The injuries on his body were also a lot less. It seemed that the lack of an eye was a big limitation. Just when everyone thought that Caesar's new eye would have no problems, Caesar began to act strangely. After showing off for 2 days, Caesar began to look a little irritated. He no longer ran up and down the mountain, but lay down in front of his house. At first, Caesar would occasionally use his forelimbs to rub his eye. After all, he wasn't human and his claws weren't as nimble. Every time, he had to tilt his head and use his claws to rub his eye. However, when Xiaoxian examined him, he didn't find any abnormalities in his new right eye. It was still the same as when the true eye was fused. Moreover, when Caesar used his claws to rub his eye, he didn't just rub his right eye, he also rubbed his left eye. What's wrong with it? Old Ke was worried. I don't know either. Xiaoxian looked at Caesar and felt uneasy. The fusion of the true eye was too smooth, but now this was happening. Could it be the delayed rejection of the true eye? As an elder, Xiaoxian didn't have to patrol in shifts. Xiaoxian didn't go to the Flaming River trading point either. Instead, he stayed at home to guard Caesar's eye. On the 5th day after the right eye was born, Caesar seemed to be even more irritated. The frequency of him rubbing his eye with his claws increased. Sometimes he would even growl. He looked very annoyed. Perhaps he felt that his claws weren't nimble enough to rub his eye, so he would just rub his eye on the ground. Xiaoxian couldn't find the reason. He guessed that it was the delayed rejection of the true eye. It was a side effect after the eye was born, so both his wolf eyes were affected. However, every time he looked at Caesar's eyes, he didn't find any abnormalities. However, Caesar was getting more and more irritated. At first he was rubbing his eye on the ground, but now, he was banging his head on the ground. He would even run out and hit trees. However, other than these abnormal behaviors, there were no other changes in Caesar's body. There were no signs of rejection during the fusion of the true eye, like the shaman said. His 2 wolf eyes were still normal. It was just that his gaze became more ferocious due to his irritability. Sometimes, when people from the tribe came to visit Caesar, they would be frightened by the look in his eyes. As the days passed, Caesar's behavior of knocking his head on the ground and trees became more and more serious. Eventually, he even felt that knocking his head on the ground wasn't enough. He knocked his head on the ground until it bled. No matter how strong a fearsome beast's recovery ability was, it couldn't withstand his constant banging. This kind of self-abuse made many people in the tribe worried. As expected, the true eye of the Jing tribe wasn't that easy to install. Xiao Xian went to the Guizhe to ask for some medicine. The Guizhe was trained to be the successor of the shaman since he was young, so he knew a lot about medicine and diseases. However, he had never seen a situation like Caesar's, so he couldn't understand the symptoms. He could only try to make some supportive medicine that could calm the beast down or strengthen its immune system. However, Caesar's condition didn't get better because of this. What should we do? The Guizhe passed the medicine he made to the Xiao Xian. She looked through all the records left by her ancestors, but none of them matched. After all, most of the records were about humans. There were very few records about fearsome beasts. I plan to take him to the Jing tribe and see if the Jing shaman can help him. As soon as Xiao Xian finished speaking, the Langjie hurriedly ran up the mountain to find the Xiao Xian. Caesar ran away. Did he knock his head on the mountain again? The Xiao Xian asked. No, he ran out of the tribe and went into the forest. There's something wrong with him. The Langjie was on patrol today. When he saw Caesar pass by their patrol team like the wind, he followed him for a while. When he saw that something was wrong, he immediately ran over to find the Xiao Xian. The Xiao Xian's expression changed. He put down the medicine bag in his hand and followed the Langjie down the mountain. They chased after Caesar. Chapter 669. While Langjie was looking for Xiao Xian, Caesar had already run out of the tribe's territory. Some of the patrol team split off to follow him, but it didn't take long for them to be left behind. They weren't out hunting, and they didn't have enough equipment. It wasn't a wise decision to chase after him rashly. Should they chase? For a moment they hesitated. Just then, Langjie caught up with Xiao Xian, and they asked Xiao Xian, "Why don't we go back and prepare some tools before going out to chase?" Only with preparation could they track him for a longer time. Otherwise, forget about tracking him. They might not even be able to keep their lives in the forest. No need. You guys go back and continue patrolling. I can follow him alone, Xiao Xian said. How can you do it alone? Langjie disagreed. The others didn't agree either. Xiao Xian pointed above his head. Langjie and the others looked up and saw an eagle. Seeing Cha-Cha flying over, Langjie and the others understood. It was indeed faster and safer to track him from the air. Without further ado, Langjie and the others returned to the tribe to continue patrolling. Xiao Xian let Cha-Cha lead them to look for Caesar's tracks from the air. There were some traces of trees being knocked down in the forest below. Those were left by Caesar. As long as they followed these traces, they would definitely be able to catch up. According to Langjie and the others, Caesar was like a madman when he ran out. In the past, he would greet the patrolling warriors when he went out looking for food and play a game of bumping. Even a few days ago when he was irritated and tortured himself, he would stop for a moment when he saw the patrolling warriors. Then he would avoid places with people and run into trees. But today, he simply ignored everything and rushed out directly. Xiao Xian was worried that Caesar's condition wasn't quite right today. If the true eye had triggered a delayed rejection reaction, then the side effects would be huge. It was as if it was trying to drive Caesar crazy. However, even if they found Caesar, how should they deal with him? Gouge out the right eye that had already grown back. The pain was probably even worse than when he lost his right eye. But compared to his life, it was not that important. But what Xiao Xian was worried about was that both of Caesar's eyes might have been affected. After all, Caesar's movements during this period of time were not limited to his right eye. When he raised his claws, he rubbed them on both eyes. Was he going to destroy both his eyes? Thinking of this, Xiao Xian couldn't help but regret. This was no longer within the range of rejection that the shaman had mentioned. It had also exceeded Xiao Xian's expectations. Letting out a long sigh, The veins on his arms bulged because of his clenched fists. Xiao Xian looked down at the forest below. No matter what, even if Caesar lost both of his eyes, it was fine as long as he could live and become normal again. It didn't matter if he couldn't continue hunting. He could hunt more prey and raise a wolf. The deeper they went into the forest, the denser the forest became. There were also more towering ancient trees. Looking from above, Caesar's tracks were not obvious. Cha-Cha's eagle eye couldn't distinguish them, so it was much more difficult to track him down. Fortunately, Caesar had been engraved by Xiao Xian. Although this connection couldn't be compared to the enslaved sapphire, as long as they weren't too far apart, Xiao Xian could still sense some of it. Go that way. Xiao Xian pointed in a direction and signaled Cha-Cha to fly there. Even if Caesar wasn't in the right state and seemed to have lost his mind and become manic, the route he chose was still familiar to him. It wasn't the hunting route of the hunting team, but the route Caesar took when he was looking for food. Xiao Xian had followed him a few times, so he had some impression of it. Cha-Cha often went out with Caesar to look for food, so it was more familiar with this route. The direction that Xiao Xian pointed to was Caesar's hunting route. Cha-Cha barked, indicating that it had understood Caesar's direction. The sun was setting, and the day was coming to an end. It was close to dusk, and it would be even harder to track him down at night. After all, Cha-Cha's perception at night wasn't as good as during the day. They still couldn't see Caesar's figure, but Xiao Xian could feel that he was getting closer. It was just that Caesar was still running, so he couldn't close the distance immediately. Night fell. Since the full moon period of the 2 moons had just passed, the separated moons were still very big, and the moonlight was enough to illuminate the night. The flying insects hiding in the darkness spread their wings and flew towards the light source in the sky along a spiral trajectory. Even in the air, Xiao Xian could see the situation in the forest below. Even if it was pitch black, Xiao Xian could still see with his special vision. But now, it was more dependent on Xiao Xian's perception to identify the exact location. Keep flying in that direction, we are very close. Cha-Cha's flying speed was much slower at night. It usually moved during the day, so it knew which birds were in the sky, but it didn't know so much at night. It had to be careful. It couldn't be careless because of tracking, or it and Xiao Xian would both be killed. A wolf's howl came from afar. It wasn't the usual excited howl, but more like a meaningless howl, as if it was suppressing something. After the howl sounded once, there was no more movement. After flying for a while, Xiao Xian got down from the eagle's back and landed on the ground. He could sense that Caesar was nearby, but he couldn't pinpoint his exact location from the sky. The ancient trees were too dense, so he could only search on the ground. Cha-Cha was scouting from the sky. If it saw any threat, it would warn Xiao Xian. But in the forest at night, there were more predators lurking in the darkness. It couldn't be seen from above, so Xiao Xian had to be careful. In the forest, Xiao Xian smelled a trace of blood. Judging from the smell, it was still fresh. He followed the smell, and quickly heard some biting and gnawing sounds. Xiao Xian's heart tightened, and he quickened his pace. The branches above blocked most of the moonlight, but the moonlight that shone through the broken branches still allowed Xiao Xian to see the situation clearly. There was a beast's carcass there, but it didn't look like Caesar's. This made Xiao Xian breathe a sigh of relief. The dead dire beast wasn't big. It was a nocturnal predator, good at ambushing and fast. There were other nocturnal beasts gnawing around it. Carcasses like this in the forest would soon turn into skeletons. Within 30 days, there wouldn't be many bones left. Xiao Xian wanted to check the wound on the carcass to see if it was Caesar's. There were traces of wolf claws here, but there were 3 dire beasts gnawing there, and other nocturnal beasts had rushed over after smelling the blood. Xiao Xian's main goal now was to find Caesar. He didn't want to get into a conflict with these nocturnal beasts for the time being. Thus, Xiao Xian quietly left, circling around the area, and continuing to follow the trace of feeling. There was still a faint smell of blood in the air, but Xiao Xian didn't see the tree that had been hit. He was close. He was very close. Xiao Xian carefully approached. He didn't know if Caesar was still sane. If it really went crazy, it might even attack him. so Xiaoxian had to be careful. He also brought some poisonous needles with strong anesthetic effects. If Caesar really went crazy and couldn't control himself, he would directly poison Caesar and bring it back. He couldn't leave it here. A dire beast that had lost its mind couldn't survive in the forest for long. There were too many smart predators, and if he wasn't careful, he could fall into their trap. Xiaoxian didn't want to bring back a wolf skeleton that had been gnawed clean. A low growl came from not far away. It wasn't loud, as if it was suppressing some kind of pain. Xiaoxian could tell that it was Caesar's voice. It was good that it was still alive. Xiaoxian continued to approach. The closer he got, the clearer the smell of blood became. Although it wasn't strong, Xiaoxian could smell it. Some nocturnal beasts had already been attracted by the smell of blood, but they were still lingering nearby. They didn't dare to rush over, as if they were hesitant and vigilant of something. Xiaoxian looked not far away. There was a figure lying on the ground with its back to him. It was Caesar who had run out. Xiaoxian wanted to shout, but when he thought of the current situation, he just bent his finger and put it to his mouth and blew a whistle. The whistle wasn't too abrupt among the chirping of insects and active nocturnal birds, and it wouldn't attract the attention of the nocturnal beasts. It was the whistle Xiaoxian usually blew when he was hunting, and it was also a whistle that Caesar was familiar with. After Xiaoxian blew the whistle, the figure lying on the ground slowly stood up and turned to look in Xiaoxian's direction. Xiaoxian was standing on an ancient tree not far away. Caesar turned around and looked in its direction. Some of the moonlight shone down, causing Caesar's eyes to reflect a faint green light in the darkness. Xiaoxian couldn't see its eyes, but he could feel that Caesar's breathing was still stable. Although it had run so far, and had probably fought with other vicious beasts, its body was covered in wounds, and its throat was still gasping for breath. There were no signs of it going berserk. Xiaoxian wasn't sure if Caesar had regained consciousness, so he blew the whistle again. The rhythmic whistle contained a message that Xiaoxian had taught Caesar a long time ago when he was training it. It meant come here. Caesar took 2 steps toward Xiaoxian, but stopped and lowered its head to raise a front paw. Just when Xiaoxian thought it was going to rub its eyes with its paw again, it paused and lowered its paw. Then it looked up at Xiaoxian. The 2 green eyes appeared in the darkness once again. In Xiaoxian's other hand behind his back, 3 stone needles were stained with plant toxins. Caesar's condition wasn't very good, so he planned to take it back. However, just as Xiaoxian was about to make a move, his movements suddenly stopped. Xiaoxian looked at Caesar in shock. In the darkness, another green dot of light appeared above the 2 eyes of the wolf that were glowing with a faint green light. This was Xiaoxian looked at Caesar in shock. As Caesar moved closer, Xiaoxian could see it more clearly. Caesar's head was badly mangled because of its masochistic head-butting, especially its forehead. There wasn't a single piece of undamaged skin, but in the midst of the mangled flesh, a vertical eye appeared. A third eye? How could there be a third eye? Chapter 670. He thought it was the delayed rejection of the true eye, but he didn't expect to see something like this. It turned out that the reason why he had been acting strangely was because of the third eye. Xiaoxian didn't understand why this happened. A true eye could only grow 1 eye. The shaman and the others had a third eye because both of their eyes were normal. But now why did Caesar have a third eye after his right eye? When he put it in, he only put it in his right eye. What was the difference between this third eye and the other 2? Unfortunately, Caesar couldn't speak, so he couldn't tell Xiaoxian what he was feeling in detail. Xiaoxian temporarily gave up on the idea of bringing him back. Caesar wasn't angry right now. His emotions were stable, and he didn't hit the ground again. He was confused. Xiaoxian was confused too. After Xiaoxian blew the whistle, he probably understood the order. Xiaoxian saw that Caesar was walking towards them, but he stopped because his third eye opened. After understanding the reason for Caesar's strange behavior, Xiaoxian calmed down a little. This meant that it wasn't a delayed rejection, and the other 2 eyes weren't damaged either. While Xiaoxian was thinking, Caesar suddenly tilted his head. All 3 of his eyes were looking at the bushes on the side, and he let out a low growl. There was a nocturnal beast hiding there. It thought it was well hidden, and was planning to ambush Caesar. But it didn't expect Caesar to notice it first. His growl was a message to the nocturnal beast hiding behind the bushes. "I found you, get out of here." Actually, when he looked into Caesar's newly opened third eye, even though he could not see the eyes clearly due to the green light, he felt a sense of familiarity. It was similar to the Jing shamans and Mio's gazes when he was in the Jing tribe, but they were not exactly the same. Perhaps it was because the fused together was different, so the emotions they contained were different. That was why the feeling was different. Maybe it was because the fused together was different. Caesar's third eye made anyone who saw it feel like they would be found no matter if they were hiding in the bushes or behind a tree. Maybe this was why the nocturnal beasts that came over after smelling the scent of blood were hesitant and didn't move. They liked to ambush their prey. If they were discovered, it wouldn't be called ambushing. They preferred to kill in one strike, so they wouldn't move unless they were confident. That was why after Caesar's growl, the nocturnal beasts didn't leave immediately, but they didn't attack for the time being. They would continue to wait for an opportunity. The nocturnal beasts around them wouldn't move for the time being. Xiaoxian looked at Caesar, who was standing there. He blew the whistle for the third time, the same sound as before. Caesar finally walked towards Xiaoxian after hearing the whistle, but his footsteps were hesitant. He wasn't as straightforward as before. Xiaoxian could even feel Caesar's puzzled gaze. What was it puzzled about? Could it be that he saw something? Xiaoxian suddenly remembered what the shaman had said. He had said that there was a person behind him, and Caesar's third eye was similar to the shaman's. They were both born from the true eye. Did that mean that Caesar had also seen the person behind him? Was that why it had hesitated when it heard the command? However, even if Caesar had seen something it couldn't before, it still followed Xiaoxian's command and walked over. It even let out a confused whimper. As soon as it heard the whimper, Xiaoxian was sure that Caesar had regained consciousness. Its body was injured, so it wasn't suitable for it to stay where it was. It needed to find a place to treat its injuries. "Let's go." Xiaoxian turned around and walked back the way they came. At first, Xiaoxian's speed wasn't fast, but when he heard the movement on the ground behind him, Xiaoxian sped up and whistled for Cha-Cha in the sky to follow. It was nighttime, and Caesar was injured. After running so far, it must be tired. Not only it, Cha-Cha also needed to rest. Besides, it wasn't suitable for Cha-Cha to fly at night. So Xiaoxian found a place to rest and treated Caesar's wounds. He didn't bring a medicine bag, so he didn't have much medicine on him. He could only make do with what he had. Fortunately, although Caesar's injuries looked frightening, they weren't serious. Some of the shallow wounds had already scabbed over. The more serious injuries were concentrated on its back and head. The injuries on its back were left behind when it was fighting with other vicious beasts, and the injuries on its head were left behind by itself. When they were resting, Xiaoxian had a chance to take a good look at Caesar's third eye. Caesar didn't seem to be very good at controlling the third eye. After it opened, it took a long time before it stiffly closed. It was like a rusty machine, so its reactions weren't very agile. It also wasn't synchronized with the other two eyes. The skin around the third eye had hardened a lot. Xiaoxian only noticed this when he was applying medicine on Caesar's wounds. This reminded him of the true eye he caught. When he cut open the true eye, there was also a layer of hardened flesh around the true eye. He didn't know if it was because of that, but if he had the chance in the future, he should go to the Jing tribe and ask. Xiaoxian thought to himself. When Cha-Cha saw Caesar, he was even more shocked than when he found out Caesar was blind in one eye. In a moment of carelessness, this guy went from having only one eye to having three. Fearsome beasts had stronger recovery abilities than normal beasts. After one night, the wounds on Caesar's body had already scabbed over, and the smell of blood was not as strong as before. When Caesar woke up the next day, he was in good spirits. He was also clear-headed, but he still wasn't used to his third eye. Occasionally he would raise his paw to rub it. Before this, Xiaoxian always thought that he was rubbing his paw because there was something wrong with his eyes. Now, he understood that Cha-Cha actually wanted to rub the spot where his third eye grew out. It was mainly where he hit trees, the ground and the mountains. Now that his third eye had grown out perfectly, The discomfort had subsided a lot, so he no longer banged his head around crazily. Perhaps after some time, he would get used to his third eye. Because of the matter with his third eye, Caesar had used up a lot of his energy. After he recovered, he went to hunt for food. Caesar hunted faster than usual, but sometimes he would look at Xiao Xian in confusion. To be exact, he was looking behind Xiao Xian. "There's someone behind me, right?" Xiao Xian said as he nibbled on a wild fruit. Caesar only whimpered twice. He looked behind Xiao Xian with fear, but because he was close to Xiao Xian, he wasn't as vigilant. "Don't worry about him. I'll find out who's behind this sooner or later." Xiao Xian looked up into the sky. Cha-Cha had also finished hunting, so he erased all traces. "Let's go back." At the edge of the tribe, there were people standing guard. It was Lang Jie and the others. They were probably worried about Xiao Xian, so they stood guard there. Everyone was carrying bags, ready to enter the forest if anything happened. When they saw the eagle in the sky, Lang Jie and the others were delighted. However, Xiao Xian didn't sit on the eagle's back. Instead, he ran on the ground with Caesar. Caesar was injured, and because his third eye hadn't fully recovered, Xiao Xian had to keep an eye on him. "The great elder is back." Someone looked ahead and said, "Caesar is back too. It's good that they're all back safely." Lang Jie happily ran forward for a while. He was the one who brought Caesar back to the tribe, so in the Yanjiao tribe, Lang Jie and Caesar had a good relationship. During this time, he was also worried about Caesar's condition, and went to visit him several times. Now that he saw Caesar running back with Xiao Xian, he was happy to welcome them. However, when he looked at Caesar, he felt that something was wrong. As Caesar ran closer, the smile on Lang Ga's face stiffened. His eyes widened, and he rubbed his eyes before continuing to stare. The others weren't any better than Lang Ga. They had heard that Caesar's condition was caused by his new right eye. Some people even discussed in private whether the way to recover Caesar was to remove his new eye. Therefore, when Caesar returned, they stared at Caesar's right eye. At first glance, the right eye was fine. When they looked again, the left eye was fine too. Both eyes were fine, but there was a strange feeling. The hairs on the back of their necks trembled. When they looked closer, fuck. What the hell? Because he couldn't control his new eye, Caesar's third eye was still wide open when he came back. It was even vertical. Originally, a dire beast's eyes looked more ferocious than a human's. Now, this combination looked even more terrifying. Moreover, when that eye looked over, it gave people a different feeling than an ordinary eye. Therefore, the shock that Caesar's third eye brought to them could not be described as small. Not to mention Lang Jie and the others, after Xiao Xian brought Caesar back. Everyone who saw Caesar was dumbfounded. Some time ago, when Caesar's right eye had just grown out, many people in the tribe had come to watch out of curiosity. Now there were even more onlookers. After all, they had seen many wolves with two eyes. Even if the right eye had grown out, it would at least look like a normal wolf. However, they had never seen a wolf with three eyes. "I didn't expect this. I really didn't expect this. I thought only humans had three eyes. I didn't expect wolves to have it too." Duoli wanted to take a closer look, but Caesar didn't allow anyone to touch his third eye. A few days after his third eye grew out, Caesar didn't show any signs of irritation. Even his movements of rubbing his eyes with his claws became less and less. At first, his third eye was just wide open and looked dull, but it gradually became more lively. Caesar could even control the blinking of his eyes. However, Caesar usually didn't open his third eye in the tribe, because he noticed that everyone didn't seem to like his third eye. Every time they met his third eye's gaze, they would unconsciously feel nervous. Therefore, gradually, as he became more familiar with controlling his third eye, Caesar kept it closed. He would only open his third eye when he went out to look for food, or when he went out to patrol with Xiao Xian. When he didn't open his third eye, there was no trace of an eye on his forehead. It was impossible to tell that there was an eye there. If Miu was here, he would definitely tell Xiao Xian that the situation of Caesar's third eye was very similar to his. Chapter 671. After Caesar's condition stabilized, Xiao Xian would go to the Flaming River trading point every day to see if there was any new news. Ever since the last Flaming River Grand Banquet, all the tribes had been sharing information with each other. After hearing about the movements in the desert and the sea, the patrols around Yinjiao increased. People would come to the Flaming River trading point every day. Some of them were young tribesmen who went on a long journey to gain experience. They came to satisfy their curiosity after hearing about the Flaming River trading point, while others came to trade. They were very familiar with the business of buying and reselling. Xiao Xian heard that there were traveling teams who bought beast hides here and sold them at double the price in other trading points in the central region. When the moon was bright, the drumming tribe's production of water moonstones was very high. The water moonstones needed moonlight, and the bigger the moon, the higher the efficiency and the better the quality of the water moonstones. Therefore, before the moon was full, everyone in the drumming tribe began to work overtime. They hadn't stopped until now. Other than the people on duty, the rest of the people worked day and night in reverse. Most of the water moonstones they obtained were used to repay their debts and given to Yinjiao. That was why even if someone tried to steal them, they wouldn't be able to get much. After the debt was paid off, the drumming tribe's experience in making water moonstones increased. They also tasted the benefits of merging their fire seed. At least they didn't have to worry about people attacking them on the night of the full moon. They didn't have to worry about the night of the full moon, nor did they have to guard the water moon passage. They had less to worry about, so naturally, they could spend more effort on defense. The Rain tribe's life was now on the right track. A portion of the Rain tribesmen entered the Flaming River trading point and rented a house. They guarded a shop and displayed the cloth and pottery they made in the tribe. They only had to wait here for people to come and trade, so they didn't have to worry about being robbed. On the other hand, the land in the tribe had already been reclaimed. It wasn't too far from the river, so they didn't have to worry about water. The Flaming River was big enough. Even if all the rivers in the central region dried up, the Flaming River here wouldn't. They didn't have to worry about food or clothing, so their quality of life was improving. Now more and more tribesmen were entering and exiting the Flaming River trading point. They didn't need to visit other tribes, because the Flaming River trading point provided them with a central trading point. The Flaming River trading point was the largest trading point in the Flaming River region. It was also the largest trading point other than the ones in the central region and the grasslands. Of course, every team that came here would not be impressed by the animal hides and meat, but the buildings here. Even though the Flaming River trading point had more rules than other trading points, the expedition teams that came here once would always look forward to a second visit. Seeing the Flaming River trading point bustling with activity day by day, Zheng Luo felt a sense of honor and pride. In the past, Zheng Luo wanted to call this place Flaming River City, because that was how the slave masters named their cities on the other side of the sea. However, he didn't want to copy everything from the slave masters, so he was conflicted about this. You could say that he was pretentious, but he just didn't want to do everything according to the slave owners. Even if it was the same thing, he wanted to name it differently. This was the tribal people's awkward feelings towards the slave owners. Let's call it the city, Xiao Xian said. You can call it the Flaming River City. The city refers to the place where all the trading points are concentrated. In the future, this place will definitely expand. It won't stop here. Alright, then from now on, this place will be called the Flaming River City. I'll tell everyone about it during the meeting. Zheng Luo was very satisfied with this name. Thus, as the Flaming River Trading Point was named, the abbreviation of the Flaming River Trading Point, Flaming River City, gradually spread among the expedition teams. Xiao Xian stood on the highest floor of the Flaming River Castle. From here, he could see the entire Flaming River Trading Point. It's still very small now, but in the future, it will definitely become very big. An expedition team was walking on a small path. Last year, this place was still a forest. However, after the Flaming River Trading Point was built, a few large tribes from the central region had carved out a path for themselves to pass through. They had beast carriages with them, so they were very ostentatious. Later on, more and more expedition teams passed by. As the number of people increased, the trees and grass didn't grow. Some of the larger tribes even used tamed beasts to pull their carriages. For convenience, there wasn't even a large rock on the path. Compared to other places in the forest, this path was much flatter. As more people passed by, this path became more famous. Although it was more convenient to travel here, it was also more dangerous, because people would lie in ambush and rob them. Those who weren't strong and were timid rarely walked here. However, larger tribes who thought they were strong enough and weren't afraid of being robbed would walk here. At this time, the team that was walking here was a medium-sized tribe in the central region. Although it was not as powerful as those famous big tribes, it was still much stronger than most of the tribes. The people in this team were tall and sturdy. Their open chests revealed their firm muscles. Their skin was tanned from years of traveling. Their arms that held the large stone clubs were taut with distinct lines of muscles, showing how strong they were. At this time of the year, the temperature was still high. It was noon and the sun was high in the sky. The simple linen clothes of the people who were traveling were soaked with sweat. Many people took off their shirts to wipe their sweat and threw them over their shoulders. The people in the expedition team used their rough voices to discuss what they had seen and heard at the Flaming River trading point. They had just left the Flaming River trading point not long ago and bought many beast hides. They were heading back to their tribe. You don't say. The beast hides at the Flaming River trading point are really good. Of course, fearsome beast hides. How can they not be good? I heard that you can wear these hides in this season. It's quite cool to wear them. That's why they're expensive. Those with fur are better. It's a wise decision to go to the Flaming River trading point to exchange for beast hides. Haha. The children won't have to suffer from the cold this winter. Carefree laughter rang out in the forest, as if they weren't worried about being overheard. They looked casual, but from time to time, they would look around cautiously. Even if there were people guarding the perimeter of the expedition team, and people in front of them scouting the way, they still treated them with caution. Experienced travelers were already used to robberies. After leaving the Flaming River trading point, they had already killed 3 groups of people who wanted to rob them of their goods. There were about 300 people in the expedition team. The wooden cart in the middle was tied to a large wooden box. Inside were the goods they had exchanged at the Flaming River trading point. There were fearsome beast hides, dried fearsome beast meat, fearsome beast horns, etc. These were the reasons why they were willing to come all the way to the Flaming River trading point. Where their tribe was located, it was cold in winter. Generally, the hides of wild beasts were limited in keeping them warm. The totem warriors were fine. They could wear thin hides. But the little ones in the tribe couldn't bear the cold. They were especially prone to falling ill in the cold. Although the adults in their tribe were very strong, they were very weak when they were young. Every winter, there were children who fell ill and died because of the cold. The shaman couldn't do anything about it. He only said that it was a test for the little ones. Later, they found that fearsome beast hides were better for protection, so they started to collect fearsome beast hides. However, on the mainland, fearsome beasts were only found in the fearsome beast forest. Other than the grasslands, fearsome beasts were rarely seen in other places, unless the tribe reared them. What kind of place was the fearsome beast forest? Not only was it far away from their tribe, even if they went there, it would be more dangerous and they might suffer more losses. The chief of the tribe would never agree. When the Yinjiao tribe was in the fearsome beast forest, they didn't take out large amounts of beast hides to trade. Their tribe was far away, so they didn't get much information. Until the Flaming River trading point was established, more and more fearsome beast hides flowed into the central region. Their reputation in the trading point grew, but the price was very high. They heard that during the hot season, the beast hides would be cheaper, so they organized this expedition. They were very satisfied with the goods and discussed going there again next year. Although they wanted to go to the Flaming River trading point more often to trade for beast meat, it was too far away and took too much time. Also, they would encounter more trouble, and there would be more people taking shortcuts, so there would be more casualties. As the team was talking, the person in front suddenly stopped in his tracks. The person behind the team also stopped talking and became alert. For a moment, the forest was so quiet that only the chirping of birds could be heard. The wind in front of them carried a hint of the smell of blood. The people at the back of the group stuck their heads out to look ahead. They saw that on this road, about 100 meters ahead of them, there was a person sitting on a large rock beside the road. The person was alone, but he gave them a very dangerous feeling. He looked even bigger than the two of them. If he stood up, he would give them a lot of pressure. Not only that, the person's greenish-gray skin was covered with totemic patterns that they had never seen before. His clenched fists were bigger than their faces, and were stained with blood. At his feet, there were about 10 people lying in a mess. These people were all dead. None of them were injured by a sharp weapon. It was probably just a big fist that killed them. Before they got close, they could feel the strong murderous aura coming from the person. The person looked up at them. His sunken eyes were as fierce as a heavy axe, as if he was going to cut them down in the next moment. This made many people in the team tense up. Even the scavenger birds that rushed over only rested on the trees at the side because of the person. They did not dare to go down and peck. The team would not stop or change their route because of the person in front. They first sent a group of people to test the person, but the person was silent and did not even bother to look at them. This attitude did not make them unhappy. Instead, it made them heave a sigh of relief. They had traveled for so many years and met many people. Those talkative people who seemed to be friendly and easy to talk to could very well be snakes in disguise. On the other hand, this kind of silent person who exuded an aura of, "I can't be bothered with you guys," made them feel more at ease. Because as long as they did not provoke such a person, the other party would not make a move. There were many people in their team, and they were confident that they could win against such a person. However, if they really fought, there would definitely be unnecessary casualties. If they could avoid it, they would avoid it. As for the dead people on the ground, based on their experience, they were more likely to ambush and rob them. Bullying the weak and fearing the strong was the rule of survival. You don't even know who you can and can't touch, and you still want to learn how to rob others? You are simply courting death. You deserve to be killed. The leader of the team retracted his gaze and signaled for everyone to continue on their way. They were still on guard against that person. However, even when their team had completely walked past and was far away, the other party did not spare them a glance. Only when the people at the back of the team turned around to look, that person stepped on the head of the corpse lying at his feet and crushed it. The team left even faster. When the team had completely disappeared from sight, and not a single sound could be heard, the person who originally had a murderous look in his eyes and looked like he was going to start a massacre in the next moment suddenly changed. It was like a heavy axe that suddenly had a handle left, and it was even made of cork. That person stood up from the rock and arched his back to look at the bushes not far away. His eyes were filled with respect and flattery. "Master, they are all gone." Following the rustling sound, a person walked out from behind the bushes. The person was dressed in gray cloth and did not look strong. He was about the same as an ordinary person. There was a sense of elegance in the way he patted the grass. Compared to the big guy next to him, he was like a child standing next to an adult. After walking out of the forest, the person in gray cloth bent his forefingers slightly. The tip of his thumb moved back and forth between the knuckles of the other 4 fingers. Then he said, "We will be there in 5 days." When he lifted his foot and walked out, he swept a glance at the people on the ground and did not look anymore. If he came alone this time, he would probably have been hacked to death. However, who told him to bring slaves? There was an old saying among the nobles that if you want to beat the master, you have to look at the dog first. You can't even beat the dog, and you want to beat the master. Chapter 672. There were 3 entrances to the Flaming River trading point. Under normal circumstances, this was not a good time to travel. Even in the few large trading points in the central region, it was the quietest time of the year other than the coldest winter. Travel teams usually avoided the cold and hot weather when traveling. However, since the weather had warmed up before the full moon, the temperature had yet to drop. The Flaming River trading point was bustling with activity. Most of the travelers were here for beast hides, because beast hides were very cheap at this time of the year. Most of them were high-quality fearsome beast hides. Yinjiao increased their patrols and guards. To the travelers, they thought it was because there were too many people here that they had to increase the number of patrols. The people who initially had other thoughts also temporarily stopped after seeing the strengthened guards. A few days ago, there were people who tried to force people to buy and sell goods in the trading point. When they were bumped into by the Flaming Horn Patrol team, they were immediately thrown out. Luckily, the troublemaker was smart and did not draw his sword. If he drew his sword on a Yinjiao patrol team, he would be dead. In the face of a stronger force, even if they were unhappy with the rules, they had to follow them. Luckily, most of the travel teams liked this place. After being punished time and time again, the people in the trading point became much more obedient. As for everyone's misunderstanding, the Flaming Horns did not explain. Kuan Tu was on duty at the largest entrance of the trading point today. After he returned from the Flaming River with Xiao Xian, his status among the guards had risen. Those who could be brought out by the first elder were always envied by others. When Kuan Tu was resting, he would also talk to the team about the expedition. He knew what to say and what not to say. If he said something that shouldn't be made public, he wouldn't be able to follow the expedition in the future. No matter what they did during their break, they had to be on duty. Kuan Tu was originally thinking about Caesar's third eye. Today, Caesar came to the trading point with Xiao Xian, but he did not see Caesar's third eye. However, now is not the time to think about this. He suppressed his curiosity and focused on guarding. A whistle came from the forest in the distance. Kuan Tu and the others' expressions changed. They raised their guard again and looked in the direction of the whistle. Since Yinjiao's patrols had expanded their patrols, the area they were patrolling had also increased. Those who wanted to rob outside the Flaming River trading point had no choice but to retreat further. The whistle just now was a warning to the guards to be on high alert. A dangerous person was coming. If it was just a regular robber, the patrol team would not have issued such a whistle. What's wrong? Xiang Chun, who was in charge of guarding the perimeter, was originally at the other door. When he heard the commotion, he immediately rushed over. There's a troublesome person. Kuan Tu stared at the path in the forest. There was no cover there, so they could see clearly if someone was walking there. Not long after, a voice came from the other side. It was a human voice. Kuan Tu and the others originally thought that it must be a large group of people from other tribes that could make the patrol team send out such a warning signal. However, they didn't expect that other than the patrol team, there were only two strangers walking out of the forest. When they saw the two people, including Xiang Chun and Kuan Tu, the guards' eyelids twitched. They had interacted with many people, so they could distinguish between those who had merged their fire seed and those who hadn't. Up until now, other than the Rain tribe and the Drumming tribe who had merged their fire seed, none of the other members of the expedition team had merged their fire seed. But now, the two people who came over were both people who had fused with fire seeds. Especially the big guy, he gave off a dangerous vibe. No wonder the patrol team sent out such a warning signal. These people were over 3 meters tall and had a sturdy physique. They exuded an aura more ferocious than a fearsome beast. It would be strange if they were not on guard. Anyone who saw them would be on high alert. Xiang Chun looked at the two strangers brought over by the patrol team. He was suspicious. Others might not know, but he was called to a meeting every few days by Zheng Luo. Naturally, he knew some things that others did not. Last time, Zheng Luo told them that there were people coming from the other side of the sea. Were these two people from the other side of the sea? Why did they come to Yinjiao? No matter what, they had to be on high alert before they knew the other party's background. The people who came from the other side were cunning. If they could make it here alive, they must be strong. Xiang Chen's gaze landed on the plainclothed person, who did not look like he could fight. Although his clothes were tattered in many places, he did not look pathetic at all. He even had a faint smile on his face. He looked very gentle. However, this person made Xiang Chen even more vigilant. The big guy next to him was obviously protecting this person. Xiang Chen was all too familiar with this kind of attitude. He had seen it many times in the slave master city on the other side of the sea. It was a master-slave relationship. The word slave master made the hairs on Xiang Chen's arms stand on end. It was as if he was about to enter battle mode. The patrol team member who brought them over had a strange expression on his face. When he saw Xiang Chen look over, he explained, "They're here for Grand Elder." He paused, then lowered his voice. "His name is EC. Someone from the E family of the 6 tribes. Xiang Chen's frown deepened as he looked at the person who was smiling warmly in front of him. EC smiled but did not answer. He just stood there. Xiang Chen stared at EC for a few seconds, then glanced at the person next to EC. "Grand Elder happens to be here today. Come with me." Xiang Chen brought EC and the big guy into the city and headed towards the Flaming River Castle. After they walked away, the guard at the gate asked the patrol team, "What happened?" "Don't mention it. We were patrolling when we heard screams. When we went over, we saw that big guy." The person who spoke made a pulling gesture with his hands. "He ripped a person in half. Those were probably robbers. I didn't expect to meet such a tough guy." Inside the Flaming River Castle, Xiao Xian was reading the animal skin scroll that was delivered today when he heard someone report that Xiang Chen had brought 2 strange people over. They said they were looking for him. Xiao Xian was still wondering who they were. When he saw EC, he was surprised. "Why are you here?" Xiao Xian still had an impression of EC. They had met at the small field near Jiju's field. He could understand if the other members of the E family came over. But shouldn't this person be guarding that small field and helping people settle accounts? When EC saw Xiao Xian, the first thing he said was, "Long time no see." The second thing he said was, "Is there anything to eat?" Xiao Xian gestured for someone to bring some food over. "Bring more. Qing Fu has been hungry for a long time. He might eat more," EC added. "How shameless." Zheng Luo sat on the side and observed the two. The big guy was just a slave. No matter how strong he was still a slave. What he cared about was why the E family came all the way here. Their tribe wasn't close to the E family. Not only that, they didn't have a good relationship. The E family had contributed a lot to the people who tried to kill them back then. Xiao Xian looked at the big guy who was standing there quietly. After EC spoke, his eyes lit up, and he couldn't help but gulp. He looked starving. The grasshopper that EC had mentioned just now was none other than this person. Your slave is not bad. He was able to escort someone here alive. This was not a simple person. EC sighed. He sensed Zheng Luo and Xiang Chen's wary gazes. He didn't beat around the bush. I'm here to seek refuge with you. Zheng Luo and Xiang Chen didn't believe him at all. The E family of the 6 tribes, a noble from the royal city, came all the way here to seek refuge with the Yinjiao tribe? Do you think I'm stupid? Xiao Xian was only surprised for a moment before asking. Has there been a change in the situation there? The land under my name has been taken back to recruit people. I can't do divination, so I can't survive. I have to find another way. So that's why he came here. Zheng Luo and Xiang Chen still didn't believe him. The slave masters were too cunning, especially the Yi family. Just then, someone came over with roasted beast meat. Qing Fu's eyes were glued to the meat, saliva dripping from his mouth. Even so, he didn't eat. Instead, he looked at EC. Eat, said EC. Qing Fu grinned excitedly. Then he pounced on a roasted beast leg and began chewing. This man was scarier than the Ji tribe when he smiled. Everyone in the room thought at the same time. When Qing Fu smiled, her 4 fangs were much longer than the rest of her teeth. She looked like a ferocious beast that was about to bite someone. But this was the man they were looking for. He didn't have a trace of murderous intent. In fact, he looked calm and happy. If one didn't look at him and just felt his aura, he would be temporarily classified as harmless. Even the Yinjiao people, who were sensitive to auras, could sense it. Qing Fu has fearsome beast blood in his veins. EC ate the meat unhurriedly. It's said that Qing Fu's ancestors were from a certain tribe. Later, the fire seed disappeared in large quantities. After merging with the fire seed, the tribe dispersed. I don't know which tribe it was exactly. It's been too long, and no one can say for sure. All I know is that half of the people in that tribe have fearsome beast blood in their veins. They are strong, powerful, and have amazing recovery abilities. Unfortunately, they aren't smart. a natural humanoid war machine with low IQ. This was EC's evaluation of Qing Fu and his tribe members with fearsome beast blood in their veins. If they're left alone in the forest, they'll die soon. They don't know how to tell directions and can easily fall into traps. No matter how strong they are, they can't make up for that. However, it's good to be a slave, EC said. It wasn't the Yinjiao people's savage and ferocious aura, but it was closer to the natural wild aura of the fearsome beasts in the forest. Someone with fearsome beast blood in their veins. Did that mean Qing Fu was a half-beast man? No wonder Qing Fu looked like a fearsome beast in the forest at first glance. His ancestors had strong tastes. Chapter 673. Grasshopper didn't speak much, so Zheng Luo and the rest thought he was just a dumb slave of few words. EC had also said that this slave's race wasn't very intelligent, but the reason Grasshopper didn't speak much was because he wasn't familiar with the local language. When EC spoke to Xiao Xian and the rest, he used the local language which he had learned after coming here. It was hard to imagine that he had learned most of the local language in just 20 to 30 days. After the disaster last year, things didn't go well over there either, right? Xiao Xian asked. Not only did things not go well, it was terrible. EC's heart bled when he thought of his farm's harvest. Actually, the year the Flaming Horn tribe caused such a huge commotion, there was a snowstorm in winter. It was even colder than the previous year. Winter came earlier in King City, and it often snowed heavily. My little farm didn't have a good harvest. If it weren't for a batch of grains that was harvested before winter, I'm afraid we wouldn't have anything to eat. The Golden Grain Farm wasn't doing too well either. Even though we predicted the winter disaster, we still couldn't avoid losses when it really hit. EC smiled mockingly. But now that the weather has returned to normal, I don't have to rely on the farm anymore. Actually, ever since Yinjiao caused a ruckus, the atmosphere in Royal City has been irritable. Especially the Yi family, many of them couldn't sleep at night. After last year's disaster, there were even more people who became restless. I'm sure you know why. Rock Hill City? Asked Zheng Luo. You could say that, but to be more precise, the Yi family isn't interested in Mu Han's descendants. Oh, I should say the Sher family of Rock Hill City now. Mu Han has already abandoned his tribe's name. The Yi family of Royal City doesn't care about the Sher family of Rock Hill City. What they care about is the bad luck that year. Bad luck? Zheng Luo didn't understand what EC meant. Xiao Xian remembered something he had heard before. Yi Xiang of the Yi family? The Yi family that came with Mu Han from the Mu family? Not bad. EC's interest was piqued at the mention of this. Mu Han and Yi Xiang were extremely talented back then. The results of the Yi family's divination are actually starting to come true now. You look like you're looking forward to their battle, Xiao Xian said. EC didn't deny it. I was also forced away by the Yi family, but I wasn't as pitiful as Yi Xiang was. I didn't have his talent either. Now the 6 noble families of the royal city are starting to recruit tribesmen, just like the Linlu tribe. Most of the money in the hands of us, who have no talent and no future, is being used to recruit people. Xiao Xian had seen EC's situation before. Although EC's words made sense, he didn't fully believe them. Tell me, what's your goal? EC's smile faded. I want to see what the bad luck from back then has done in the past 1,000 years. I'm afraid you don't know this, but not long after the disaster, the royal city sent people to guard the borders of the mainland to take a look. In the end, other than 2 people who were purposely let go, the rest all died. After Yinjiao crossed the sea, the royal city specially sent a group of people to guard the border. Some of the smaller tribes living there were forced to migrate. Because the Yi family's divination predicted a possible danger, most of the people stationed there managed to avoid the disaster. Unfortunately, after crossing the sea, almost all of them died. Xiao Xian only heard that there were strange movements in the desert. Perhaps EC's words were part of it. The 2 people who were let go said there were monsters. There were a lot of them, and they looked like humans but weren't. Those must be Yi Xiang's work. I'm very curious. Unfortunately, my status in the Yi family isn't high enough, so I can't get close to those things. Plus, I was forced to find a way to come here. But as you know, the Yi family isn't the type to fight, so I brought my own slaves. EC looked at Xiao Xian and the rest's reactions and continued. After I came here, I was unfamiliar with the place and my personal strength was limited. I heard about the Flaming River trading point in Yanjiao, so I came here to join you. How did you get here? Zheng Luo's sharp eyes looked at him. Crossing the sea and crossing the desert was no easy feat. It wasn't that easy to fool them. EC didn't panic. He explained, it's a long-winged bird. The long-winged bird's wings were long and well-developed. It could fly for long distances, and was one of the best among flying birds. Its size ranged from half a meter to a few meters long. Some even had a wingspan of 10 meters. Not only could they fly, but they could also hunt in the water. I know someone whose slave is a long-winged bird. I only borrowed his bird for a short period of time. That cost me all my savings. EC turned to Xiao Xian. Have you seen those monsters in the desert? No. Zheng Luo didn't look happy. How about this, you take me in? If you can catch those monsters, let me take a look. After all, the Yi family made them. I might be able to answer your questions. What do you think? Zheng Luo was about to say something when EC added. Of course, I'm not a freeloader. I can help you with your accounts. Your grand elder Xiao Xian knows my abilities. Although I can't perform divination like the other Yi family members, I'm confident in this. Also, my slave Grasshopper can do some manual labor. He's as strong as any of you. EC didn't say anything. He looked at Xiao Xian. Seeing Xiao Xian nod, he took out a beast skin scroll and looked at the distribution of houses. In the end, he chose the house closest to the Flaming River Castle. Of course, EC didn't have a single cent on hand right now. They wouldn't give him food, clothing, and accommodation for free. That was why EC put it on credit for now. EC and a full grasshopper were brought to the house arranged for them. After they left, Zheng Luo asked Xiao Xian, how trustworthy do you think his words are? 50-50. We'll keep him under our watch for now, Xiao Xian said. Zheng Luo thought so too. Although he didn't like the 6 major tribes in the royal city, he had to admit that the Yi family members were all very capable. Even if they couldn't perform divination, they couldn't be underestimated. They'd keep him under their watch for now. If he could help Yanjiao, it would be good. But if they found anything that would harm the tribe, they'd kill him immediately. At this moment, an eagle screeched in the sky. Xiao Xian and Zheng Luo's expressions changed at the same time. They didn't want to think about EC anymore. The eagle screeched just now. 2 days ago, Xiao Xian received a beast skin scroll from the Hui tribe's giant mountain eagle. It said that they would send the monster they caught over, but they didn't know the exact time. Xiao Xian told Cha-Cha to keep an eye on the sky for these 2 days. Giant mountain eagles had stronger senses. If an eagle returned to the tribe, it would definitely notice. Cha-Cha's screeching just now was to tell Xiao Xian that the goods had arrived. The two of them rushed to the top of the Flaming River Tower. A giant mountain eagle landed with a long wooden box in its talons. This was an eagle from the Hui tribe. There were people on its back. When EC asked them if they'd seen the monsters in the desert, Xiao Xian said he hadn't. That was the truth. On the Yanjiao side, only Xiao Xian had seen them before. When Xiao Xian went to the grasslands to deliver the invitation letter, he saw the humanoid monster when he went to the Hui tribe. Is this it? Zheng Luo walked over curiously. That's it. But it's best to move it into the house before opening it. We don't want to see Yang Guang. We used medicine to seal it. If we see Yang Guang, the medicine won't work, said the Hui tribesman who came over. Zheng Luo didn't say anything. He carried the coffin-like wooden box and carefully moved it into a secret room in the Flaming River Castle. There was no one else except the Hui tribesman, Xiao Xian and Zheng Luo. After closing the stone door, there was no light. Xiao Xian took out a water moonstone to light up the room. The square wooden box was like a coffin, lying quietly in the gloomy secret room. Even before it was opened, it gave off a strange and eerie feeling. Zheng Luo shivered inexplicably. Open it. Xiao Xian gestured to the Hui tribesman who brought the goods over. The other party nodded and took the dagger from Xiao Xian. His gaze lingered on the green metallic dagger for a few seconds, Then he cut the rope that tied the wooden box. The wooden box was tightly bound by the rope, but the dagger was very sharp. With a swipe of the dagger, the rope was cut off without much effort. When he returned the dagger to Xiaoxian, the Hui tribesman's eyes flashed with reluctance. He was very envious of Yinjiao's weapon material. He untied the rope and opened the lid. The creaking sound of the wooden planks was very clear in the secret room. After opening the lid, Xiaoxian saw what was inside. His first thought was, a mummy? Inside the wooden box, the Hui tribesman wrapped the goods inside with animal skin. The thick fur acted as a cushion, and the goods were wrapped in green cloth. They could barely make out the shape of a human. A strange smell wafted out, with a hint of decay in it. Zheng Luo gulped. This is it. This was the monster that everyone was afraid of. The monster that even the nobles in the royal city on the other side of the sea were worried about. The cloth has been soaked in medicine. Wrapping it like this will slow down the decay. If Elder Xiaoxian wants to see it, you can take the cloth off, but then we won't be able to stop it from rotting faster. The Hui tribesman said. Our shaman said it's best to leave it here and not bring it into your tribe. Xiaoxian nodded, indicating that he understood. The reason why they moved the item to the Flaming River trading point and not to Yinjiao's tribe was mentioned in the animal skin scroll they received before. The Hui tribe shaman said that this monster was too strange, so it was best to leave it far away from the tribe. He also found that the closer it was to the fire seed, the faster the monster rotted. Although Yinjiao no longer had the ancient fire seed, there were many Yinjiao people at the Yinjiao tribe's headquarters, so the fire seed's aura was still very strong. Considering all these reasons, in the end, Xiaoxian decided to let the Hui tribesman move the item to the Flaming River trading point first. Then he took out a prepared animal skin scroll and handed it to the other party. This is what your chief and shaman wanted. The other party took the animal skin scroll and carefully kept it close to his body. After receiving the item, he didn't want to stay here any longer, so he bid farewell and left. There were other people waiting for him not far away from the Flaming River trading point. Of course, he wouldn't be the only one to deliver the important item, but he didn't want to attract too much attention. That was why he came alone when he got closer. Xiaoxian gave the Hui tribesmen a summary of the experiences of their tribe, the Rain tribe, and the Drumming tribe. Although after the Flaming River Grand Banquet, more people knew about the changes in Yinjiao's fire seed, and even the fact that the ancient fire seed could fuse into a tribesman's body. Xiaoxian had told the other major tribes about it, but they were still hesitant. Now that the Hui tribe had made the first move, it seemed like they had decided to fuse with the ancient fire seed. As thanks, the Hui tribe sent the monster Xiaoxian requested. They wouldn't be able to get anything out of it if it was left in the Hui tribe anyway. Plus, this monster had rotted even more, so the Hui tribe's chief felt like there was no point in keeping it. When Xiaoxian suggested it, he agreed without much thought. After the Hui tribesman left, Zheng Luo looked at Xiaoxian for his opinion. Should we open it now, or wait for the others to come? Let me take a look first. Xiaoxian put on a pair of gloves made of fish skin. The cloth wrapped around the monster was covered in antiseptic, so he wouldn't pull it off with his bare hands. The cloth wrapped around the monster from its feet to its head. Naturally, the process of unwrapping it was the opposite, starting from the head. Zheng Luo stood on the side and watched as Xiaoxian used the greenish-gray fish skin gloves to unwrap the cloth around the monster's head. As the cloth was unwrapped, the monster's head was revealed. Zheng Luo's facial muscles twitched as he looked at the face that was so rotten that it was unrecognizable. This is a human? Zheng Luo only knew from the Hui tribe's animal skin that goods had a high degree of decay, but he thought he had seen it all before, both human and beast. But now that he saw such a strange face, he felt a chill run down his spine. This was different from normal decay. This monster was more like a weathered rot. When Xiaoxian unwrapped the cloth, there was a creaking sound. There were even pieces of dried flesh stuck to the cloth. They were black, as if they had been dyed with something. As the flesh was peeled off, the bones underneath were also exposed. The Hui tribe said that only the bones were left. This was probably what they meant. Once the skin was peeled off, The bones were exposed. A person like this is walking in the desert? How can there be such a person? Which tribe are they from? Zheng Luo was still wondering if some tribe was born with such a unique bone structure. For example, Xi's slave did not have pure human blood in his body. Xiao Xian shook his head. The last time I went to the Hui tribe, it wasn't like this. Now it's just dried up. Zheng Luo breathed a sigh of relief. He was wondering why the chief had such a strange appearance. So it wasn't like this from the beginning. However, Zheng Luo breathed a sigh of relief too early. As Xiao Xian unwrapped more and more of the cloth from the goods, the legendary monster finally revealed its true appearance. Just by looking at his head, he might only find it a little strange, but if he looked at his torso, he would discover an even bigger secret. This monster did not have any organs. Its torso and abdomen were deeply sunken. Even if it was air-dried, it would not be like this. Zheng Luo was sure that there were no organs under the dry skin of this monster's abdomen. Zheng Luo's first reaction was, did the Hui tribe cut it open? No, not the Hui tribe. They don't have that kind of hobby. The Hui tribe would never cut open a human or beast, unless it was prey they were about to eat. Then how? Zheng Luo stuttered, not knowing how to express his thoughts. He had a guess but did not want to believe it. How was this possible? The monsters they were talking about in the desert were actually humans with no organs, no blood flow and no pulse, said Xiao Xian. Zheng Luo was shocked. But Kiki, how can they live without organs and blood flow? Who said they're alive? But if they're not alive, why are they so scary? Zheng Luo did not understand. You'll have to ask the people of Rock Hill City. I've never seen these humans in action. Xiao Xian could not answer. Could this be the thing Yi said the Yi tribe's ancestor made? Zheng Luo felt a chill run down his spine. Cold sweat soaked through his clothes, and his scalp went numb. To them these were dead people. But to a certain extent, they were still alive, because they could move and cut people. I really don't know how the people of Rock Hill City made humans like this. Could it be that they made dead slaves like this? Zheng Luo muttered. Xiao Xian's eyelids twitched. There were many people in the desert, but the number of monsters was huge. If it was just the slaves who were alive, it might not reach the huge level. Especially after the battle in the desert, the number of people decreased sharply, but if the dead were included, then the number was inestimable. Not to mention, the people of Rock Hill City had been planning this for a long time. Made of dead people. Xiao Xian suddenly remembered when he was in the desert and snatched the core seed from the underground palace. At that time, he had a battle with Dao Yu in the underground palace. But after he killed Dao Yu, he met the people of Rock Hill City and could not bring Dao Yu's body back to the tribe. If the people of Rock Hill City could really make dead people into monsters like this, then would the long-dead Dao Yu also be brought back to be modified? Seeing Xiao Xian frowning as he stared at the monster, Zheng Luo scratched the goosebumps on his arms. The people of Rock Hill City are really scary. Luckily, their main target is the people on the other side of the sea. Xiao Xian closed the wooden box and moved it to another secret underground room in the Flaming River Castle. He had to study this carefully. At the very least, he had to know how to best deal with this kind of monster. He felt that if he could find out the secret of this monster, even if it was just a little bit, perhaps he could solve the problem that had been troubling him for a long time. One day, Guizhe finished concocting a new batch of pills made from veins of the sky. He planned to give Xiao Xian another bottle. He heard that Xiao Xian's pills were used to replace Caesar's eyes. Xiao Xian didn't have any left. However, she couldn't find him in the tribe. She asked Duo Kong, who often traveled between the headquarters and the trading point, "Where's Xiao Xian?" "The Grand Elder is in the underground secret room of the trading point," said Duo Kong. A few days later, Ta planned to bring a team out to hunt. He wanted to ask Xiao Xian if he wanted to go, but he couldn't find him in the tribe or the trading point. "Where's the Grand Elder?" "The Grand Elder is in the underground secret room of the trading point." A few days later, "Where's the Grand Elder?" "He's in the underground secret room of the trading point looking for that monster." Thus, Zheng Luo and the others knew that if they wanted to find Xiaoxian, they had to go to the underground secret room of the Flaming River Castle. Zheng Luo didn't understand. What could Xiaoxian see from that monster? However, the Grand Elder might be able to see something useful. If he really couldn't, they could call the tribesmen over. That thing was made by his ancestor. Maybe he could see something. However, before Xiaoxian said anything, they wouldn't disturb Xiaoxian unless it was an emergency. On this day, Xiaoxian was still in the underground secret room of the Flaming River Castle. He had figured out something in the past few days. He remembered that when he went to the Hui tribe to deliver the invitation letter, when he opened the door and entered the room, he felt a strange, eerie fire seed energy. He had never seen a fire seed with that kind of eerie aura before. Now the aura on this monster was still there. It was just a little fainter, but not completely gone. At that time, Xiaoxian couldn't investigate because he was in the Hui tribe. Now he realized that the strange fire seed energy on this monster was not in its flesh, but in its bones. But how did the people who created these monsters connect the fire seed with the bones? How did they turn these dead people into monsters that could stand up again? Bones? What was in the bones? Blood marrow. Xiaoxian picked up his knife and prepared to cut it open. At that moment, there was a knock on the stone door of the secret room. What is it? Xiaoxian opened the stone door and looked at Ao, puzzled. Usually, Ao would be guarding the headquarters with Zheng Luo. But why was Ao here now? He looked very anxious. Ao saw Xiaoxian holding a knife in his hand. He didn't know why he was holding a knife in the secret room, but now was not the time to think about that. Something happened over at the 1,000-grain gold, said Ao. As soon as he heard it was the 1,000-grain gold, Xiaoxian put the secret room aside and rushed back to the headquarters with Ao. There were guards at the place where the 1,000-grain gold was planted, because the growth of the 1,000-grain gold would steal nutrients from other crops. There were no other crops within a certain range of the field. Not even a weed could be seen. The guards were right next to the field. If anyone suspicious approached, they would be discovered immediately. The 1,000-grain gold field was also surrounded by tall wooden poles. People outside couldn't see what was happening inside. After the 1,000-grain gold began to plant, the changes were even more drastic. Now the grains were lined up neatly on the ears. In order to prevent insects, other animals, and even people with bad intentions from getting close to destroy the place, nearly 50 more guards were added to the place to kill the insects that wanted to break in. The field where the 1,000-grain gold was planted was one of the most heavily guarded fields. The relationship between the 1,000-grain gold and the Yinjiao people was closer than other grains. When they merged with the fire seed, the 1,000-grain gold played a big role. It could help the Yinjiao people merge with the fire seed better. It also had other effects. Among all the grains, the Yinjiao people liked the 1,000-grain gold the most. Ao valued it very much. The production this year was much higher than before. Ao was very happy, but in the past few days, he found some signs in the field that made him very angry. It's almost time for the 1,000-grain gold to ripen. I come here every day to take a look. The day before yesterday, I found that one of the 1,000-grain gold plants was missing a grain. I don't know what happened. I asked the people who look after the field. They didn't do it. I believed them. After that, I asked the guards to keep a closer eye on it. They didn't find anything strange. But Ao's face darkened. Yesterday, when I came to take a look, another plant was missing a grain. I kept a close eye on the people who look after the fields yesterday, and asked them to keep a closer eye on it at night. But today it happened again. Xian, come and take a look. Xiaoxian looked over. The heavy ears of the 1,000-grain gold drooped down. Because they were not ripe yet, they were still green. Ao pointed at 1,000-grain gold. Because the 1,000-grain gold was much taller than a person, Ao had to look up every time he came here. If he wasn't familiar with every single 1,000-grain gold, he wouldn't be able to tell that the stalk was cut off at a glance. Yes, the area where the grain was missing had obvious signs of being cut by a sharp weapon. It wasn't torn. Did the robbers set their sights on this place again? Ao was angry. He couldn't think of anyone who could do something like this. After all, the robbers had done it before. I can't tell yet. Maybe not. Xiaoxian couldn't be sure. Could it be someone from the other side of the sea? Ao guessed. The people from the other side might not be as good as the robbers, but it's possible. After all, there are many robbers there, Xiaoxian said. Because there were no longer any fire seeds on the other side of the sea, the tribes had changed greatly. Some still existed as tribes, while others were formed by like-minded people, forming special groups. The members came from different tribes. Some of these groups killed for profit, some robbed others. Of course, there were also groups that operated as trade caravans or other businesses. There were many robbers too. They couldn't rule out the possibility. Ao's brows were furrowed so tightly that he could squeeze a heavy grain. This made him very worried. It hadn't even ripened yet, and something had already happened. They didn't even know who did it. There wasn't even a trace of suspicion. If the 1,000-grain gold plants ripen later, would they encounter more problems? He wasn't afraid of trouble, but he didn't know where to start. If he didn't even know who did it, who could he vent his anger on? You were here during the day yesterday? Xiaoxian asked. That's right. Chi and the rest came here yesterday to fertilize. I watched them personally. There was no one suspicious. I didn't find any missing grains either. Ao wasn't suspecting the people in his tribe. He was just keeping an eye on them to prevent others from sneaking in. After all, some people could imitate others' appearance, figure, and even aura. Those who were slightly weaker or had poor observation skills. In order to distinguish them, he had to keep an eye on them himself. I'll be here tonight. Call Caesar over too, Xiaoxian said. I'll be here tonight too. I'll see who stole the unripened grains from here. Ao clenched his fists and gritted his teeth. If I find out who did it, I'll kill him. Chapter 675. The 1,000-grain gold was Yinjiao's most important crop. There had always been at least 100 people guarding it. After this incident, Ao had increased the number to 200. Now he and Xiaoxian had decided to guard the area personally. They had to catch the thief. Actually, there were still many things that they did not understand about the thief. For example, why steal the grain before it was ripe? After all, an unripe 1,000-grain gold could not be used as a seed. It was even more impossible to eat it. The thief only stole a small amount each time. They even made several trips, as if it was just a game. If the thief had the ability to not be discovered by the guards, why not wait until Yinjiao had harvested all the 1,000-grain gold before stealing? No matter what the reason was, Xiaoxian had to find the thief. Ever since Caesar's right eye had recovered and he had mastered the third eye, his eyesight had also improved. 2 elders, a 3-eyed wolf, and 200 guards. Even if they could not catch the thief, they should at least be able to find some traces, right? If they could not catch the thief in the day and did not notice anything strange, then it was very likely that the thief acted at night. Hence, when the sun set and the moons hung high in the sky, the guards on duty became alert. They stood outside the field where the 1,000-grain gold was planted. 2 people next to each other were even chatting. It was impossible for someone to pass between them without them noticing, unless the thief's movements were too strange. Xiaoxian, Ao, and Caesar were all guarding the field. Because the previous 3 instances of the theft did not occur on the same 1,000-grain gold plant, and the 3 plants were in different parts of the field, the thief was definitely not targeting just one spot. If he appeared, any 1,000-grain gold plant could be his target. They could only stand guard at the side. The light from the 2 moons in the sky was much dimmer than before. As the 2 moons moved further and further apart in the sky, their light would become dimmer and dimmer. However, at this time of the year, even though the moonlight could not illuminate the ground clearly, those with good eyesight could still see their surroundings clearly. It's too quiet. Xiaoxian looked at the 1,000-grain gold around him, and looked up at the sky. Ever since he came back from the flaming river, the number of times he came here could be counted on one hand. At first, it was because of Caesar's eyes, so he didn't have the time to care about anything else. After that, he wrote down the steps to fuse with the fire seed for the Hui tribe. Recently, he had been staring at that monster, so he had indeed neglected things here. It's been like this for the past 3 days. Ao could not think of a reason. According to the guards, there were still a lot of insects eyeing the 1,000-grain gold at night. They would use all kinds of methods to get rid of them. But since 3 nights ago, there have been fewer insects here. There were still some insects flying in the sky, but compared to the lively night before, there weren't many insect sounds now. They had stationed so many soldiers around the 1,000-grain gold plantation to guard against people with bad intentions. Secondly, it was to prevent insects from eating the 1,000-grain gold. Near the forest, there were many insects that ate the crops. The higher the quality of the crops, the more insects they attracted. In the future, there would even be birds coming over. However, it was very strange that they were in such a quiet place. As the night deepened, the human voices died down. Only the birds in the distance could be heard, as well as the faint roars of beasts further away in the forest. Xiao Xian's heart suddenly skipped a beat, and a sense of horror that almost made his scalp explode was suddenly born. Caesar, who was lying beside him, suddenly stood up. He opened his third eye and looked around. He had clearly sensed danger, but he did not know where the source of the danger was. Seeing Xiao Xian's expression and Caesar's reaction, Ao knew something was wrong. However, he could feel the change in the atmosphere, but he did not know why. In the sky, the insects that had been flying above the fields, as well as the sounds of the insects in the fields, had now inadvertently disappeared without a trace. Xiao Xian waited quietly. He slowed his breathing and tried his best to reduce his presence. This feeling reminded him of the fearsome beast he saw near the drumming tribe's river when he was traveling downstream. The only difference was that this feeling was much stronger than before. Was it a fearsome beast? Or a human? Xiao Xian could not find the answer. He did not hear any other sounds. At the drumming tribe, he could still hear the sound of water. But now he heard nothing. That feeling was already there. Even if the other party was not near, it was definitely watching them from the surroundings. Suddenly there was a faint sound in the air. It sounded like the wind blowing. Those who were weaker or further away might not have noticed it. It was coming from above the field. Xiao Xian looked in one direction as if he sensed something. Caesar was also staring in that direction, but he only growled. His fur stood on end, but he did not rush over. He looked very afraid. Ao's senses were not as strong as theirs. He only felt that something was approaching and could vaguely sense its direction. His intuition told him that it would not be easy to deal with. He could only grip the spear in his hand tightly and stare nervously in that direction. The guards around the field did not notice anything strange. There were only the two of them and the wolf here. But soon that feeling disappeared. There was a faint sound in the air, but Ao could not pinpoint its direction. He only knew that the sound and the aura he was so afraid of came from somewhere in the air. Unable to determine what was going on, Ao looked at Xiao Xian. He wanted to ask Xiao Xian what happened. What should he do? Should he go and investigate immediately, or continue to guard here? Even if he could not say it out loud, he could make gestures. Xiao Xian did not look at him. Xiao Xian's body stiffened. He slowly turned around and looked behind him. Ao did not understand. He was standing not far from Xiao Xian. When he saw Xiao Xian looking behind him, he turned around to look as well. The 1,000-grain gold behind them was like a small tree. Its long and narrow leaves extended outwards. Looking from below, one could see beautiful arcs. At this moment, on one of the 1,000-grain gold trees behind them, there was an object hanging upside down from the palm-wide leaf. The dim moonlight was enough for Ao to see what it was. Because of that, he could not help but gasp. However, he was so shocked and nervous that he did not even dare to breathe. He held his breath, and every muscle in his body seemed to be issuing the highest alarm. The blood in his body seemed to be flowing backward, and he felt as if he had been thrown into an ice cave in winter. Even moving a little bit was extremely difficult. It was a bat hanging upside down from the 1,000-grain gold leaf. In the bat's claws was a freshly cut 1,000-grain gold ear. During the day, Ao had said that if he found out who did this, he would definitely kill that person. But now, Ao knew that he could not kill this thief. Chapter 676. To date, Xiao Xian had only met one bat that could appear so quietly behind them. That was when he was digging for fire crystals. It was also a creature that no one in Yinjiao wanted to provoke. And now, the bat behind Xiao Xian and Ao was the bat leader that they had seen that year. Although it was not a king beast, it was half a king beast. Back then, it had traumatized the Yinjiao people so much that they had to change their hunting routes. Facing such an opponent, would it be easy to kill it? Obviously not. Ao did not know what to do either. He just stood there motionless. The cut on the 1,000-grain gold was very smooth. The thing that had cut it was very sharp and fast. They had thought that the robbers had used a sharp weapon to cut it, but now they knew that it was the bat leader. Who would have thought? The problem was, didn't the bat leader lead a group of bats on the mountain in the forest? Back then, the giant pit where they had found the fire crystals had been occupied by a group of bats. But after the bat leader appeared, it led the group of bats to a new territory. It was a whole mountain with a peak that reached into the clouds. That was a large territory, and it was not close to where they were. Even if the bat leader could fly fast, why would it fly to Yinjiao's farmland every day and harvest a grain every day? Could it be that it was interested in the 1,000-grain gold? Unripe 1,000-grain gold should not be attractive enough to attract it from the depths of the forest. Xiao Xian's mind raced as he tried to think of a way to deal with the current situation. Even if he was stronger than before, and Ao and the rest had improved due to the fusion of the fire seed, they would still be at a disadvantage if they fought this bat leader head-on. Under the moonlight, a terrifying creature was quietly hanging upside down on the 1,000-grain gold 2 steps away from them. It did not move at all. It just looked at Xiao Xian and Ao. Its gaze was more focused on Xiao Xian. Just as Xiao Xian was thinking about how to deal with it, the bat that was hanging upside down on the 1,000-grain gold moved its wings almost silently. It flashed by like a black shadow. It was not obvious in the night, and soon disappeared into the fields. That aura that made people nervous also disappeared without a trace. Caesar's fur was still standing. He opened his 3 eyes carefully and looked around. Phew! Xiao Xian let out a long sigh of relief. He would never have thought that it would be this guy. It left? Ao asked in a low voice. Yes, it's gone. When he heard Xiao Xian's answer, Ao sat down on the ground. He did not care if there was any organic fertilizer in the soil. Ao wiped the sweat off his forehead and looked at Xiao Xian. It should be it, right? That's it. As he spoke, Xiao Xian walked in the direction where he first sensed the strange atmosphere. There they found the 4,000-grain gold that had been cut. There was only one cut, and the cut was fresh. There was still green juice flowing out of the cut. Just looking at the cut, it was the same as the cuts on the other 3 trees that Ao pointed out to Xiao Xian. They confirmed that it was a thief, but they did not know how to deal with this thief that came to the 1,000-grain gold every day recently. If they fought, they would have to pay a high price. If they did not fight, the bat leader would come over every day. It was no longer in the depths of the forest. Xiao Xian had a feeling that it was not far from Yinjiao's headquarters. It had not returned to the Bat Mountain that it had occupied. Go ask the people in the hunting group if they noticed anything unusual when they were out hunting, said Xiao Xian. If there was no reason to attract the bat leader here, then it was very likely that something had happened at the Bat Mountain. Yes. Ao's face darkened. He was full of worries. If it was a thief, he was confident that he could fight. But he was not confident that he could defeat this opponent. When Xiao Xian and Ao walked out of the 1,000-grain gold's field, the guards outside were confused. Head Elder Ao, are you leaving just like that? Ao's eyelids drooped. He looked like he had a lot on his mind. He did not respond to the guard's words. Xiao Xian did not want to say too much. If he said too much, it would cause panic. He only said, be careful. If you encounter a situation that you cannot fight, retreat first. Before the guards realized what Xiao Xian meant, Xiao Xian and Ao had already left. Since the bat leader had left with the 1,000-grain gold, it probably would not come back. Even if it found Xiao Xian and Ao, it did not do anything at that time. It would not come back to do anything after leaving. Just like a few days ago, it would be quiet and no one would know. Xiao Xian and Ao hurried back to the tribe in the middle of the night. They woke up the hunting team leaders who were already asleep. What's going on? Ma yawned. When he entered the house, he found Xiao Xian and Ao as well as Gigu and Ta all here. The other leaders were also here. Soon, other than Duo Kong, Zheng Luo and the rest who stayed at the trading point, everyone above the level of a leader was called here. This was a place built on the mountain specifically for important discussions. They pulled down the animal skin curtains on the windows to block out the light and sound inside. The elders and chiefs looked very serious. This made the atmosphere in the room tense. If it was not something important or urgent, they would not be called here at this time. Those who were still sleepy were now fully awake. They felt uneasy as they carefully looked at Xiao Xian and Ao's expressions. They wondered what had happened. Why was the Grand Elder, who had been holed up at the Flaming River trading point all this time, called here too? After the leaders who stayed at the headquarters had all arrived, they waited for the leader to speak. Ao looked at Xiao Xian and signaled for Xiao Xian to speak first. Xiao Xian took a deep breath and looked at the people in the room. With Xiao Xian's glance, everyone seemed to be even more nervous and uneasy. During the day, Ao told me that something happened in the 1,000-grain gold plantation. Someone harvested the grains. Xiao Xian briefly told everyone what had happened during the day. As expected, when it came to the 1,000-grain gold, everyone's eyes were burning with anger. They probably had the same thoughts as Ao. They wanted to catch the thief and beat him to death. However, after Xiao Xian's words, the fire in their eyes seemed to have been doused with a bucket of ice. Just like that, the fire in their eyes was extinguished. They shivered from the cold. Those who had followed them to look for fire crystals could still remember what had happened. Why is it that bat leader? Mai clenched his fists. He clenched them, then loosened them, then clenched them again. He was anxious and conflicted. Isn't it always in the forest? Cheng, who was also a leader, did not understand and panicked. Cheng and Mai, you should be able to see the mountain from your hunting route. Did you notice anything unusual there? Xiao Xian asked. Because of the Bat Mountain, the hunting group led by Cheng had changed their route and avoided the mountain occupied by the bats. Every time, they could only see the peak of the mountain from afar, but they never got close to it. He did not want to get into trouble. He even told his brothers who had returned from the other side of the sea and warned them not to go near the mountain. I've never been there. I've only seen it from afar. I didn't see anything unusual. Cheng scratched his beard. He was frustrated. If it were people from other tribes, he would not be afraid at all. However, that bat had left a bad impression on him. He still had a huge shadow in his heart. He could not help but shiver when he thought about it. I've never been there either. Mai said. Thinking of something, Mai suddenly said, I don't know what happened at the Bat Mountain, but we found something different on our hunting route. Oh. As soon as Xiao Xian heard this, he sat up straight and asked into the microphone. You can tell me if there are any abnormalities. Mountains, trees, rivers, beasts, etc. Anything. It's on the other side of the mountain. It's the mountain where a king beast lives. Mai said. Where the king stoneworm is. Xiao Xian rarely went there now. Most of the time, he went to the green area with the advance group. Therefore, he did not know what happened on the mountain that Mai mentioned. That's it. Mai paused for a moment before voicing his doubts. Those of you who have taken that route should know that the markings left behind in the caves of the mountain won't be visible the next time you pass through. Xiao Xian nodded. Of course he remembered. There was a king stoneworm at the bottom of the mountain. It was not a legend. Also because of the king stoneworm, the mountain would move under its influence. Some of the marks left on the cave walls would not be seen the next time they went there. Sometimes, a rope thrown there would be gone the next time they went there. The caves in the mountain were like intestines that could digest and absorb. They would absorb anything that had been left there for a long time without leaving any traces behind. The closer they went to the underground, the more obvious this phenomenon became. The marks on the caves would disappear faster too. This was also why people who took that route followed each other from generation to generation. They walked based on their own experience and memories. They did not simply leave marks. I didn't notice it at first, but when I went there a few times, I found a straw rope I threw there last time. Now that Mai thought about it, he regretted it. He didn't think too much about it back then. He thought that maybe the king's stoneworm had rested for a while, or maybe it had gone somewhere else for a stroll. When it came back, the mountain would be back to normal. King Stoneworm. Xiao Xian was confused. Did something happen that even the king's stoneworm was affected? My, when did you discover that the cave was no longer swallowing the marks like before? Xiao Xian asked. A remorseful look appeared on Mai's face. When I first discovered it, it was before last winter, but I didn't think much of it at the time. However, at that time, there were many other threats in the cave, and there were many ferocious beasts that I had never seen before. When we came out of the cave, we paid more attention to those beasts. In other words, the changes in that mountain had already happened before winter, or even earlier. Maybe it's because of the natural disaster. Xiao Xian said. But that bat leader only arrived recently. Something that could affect it must have happened recently too. There was a depressing silence in the room. If they could not find the reason, they would not be able to rest assured with such a huge threat lurking in the tribe, and appearing every night. There was no fire seed in the tribe now. A beast of that level could quietly fly to the top of the mountain, without anyone noticing. What should we do? Mai looked at Xiao Xian, then at the others. No one had any intention of speaking. They could not think of a suitable solution. We'll leave tomorrow and go to Bat Mountain to take a look. Also, we'll go to the mountain where the king's stoneworm used to live, and see if we can find the reason, Xiao Xian said. That's the only way, but we have to guard the tribe well. Don't tell anyone about this until we find the reason. Otherwise, it will cause panic and give outsiders an opportunity to attack, Gigu said. After discussing the personnel arrangements, everyone left. However, no one could sleep tonight. The next day, after dawn, Xiao Xian asked Cha-Cha to take him, Ao, and 2 other leaders to the mountain. Ta Mai and the others took the ground. Caesar and Mai went together. Bats did not live on Bat Mountain in the past. But later, a leader emerged among the bats. They abandoned the small mountain with the sinkhole and took over the tall mountain. They even drove away all the other ferocious beasts in the mountain. Since then, the Yinjiao people called that mountain Bat Mountain. Xiao Xian looked at the mountain in the distance. Compared to the other mountains around it, that mountain gave off a faint sense of eeriness. And the closer he got, the clearer the feeling became. Because the bats occupied the mountain and drove away all the ferocious beasts in the mountain. Even if there were any ferocious beasts left, they would become food for the bats. As long as they were not careless beasts, they would not stay there. Who knew when they would be sucked dry by the bats? Because there were no other ferocious beasts on the mountain, even small ones, compared to the other mountains, it was exceptionally quiet and lifeless. In broad daylight, there were basically no bats flying out. It was eerily quiet. Xiao Xian did not enter the bat cave to search. Instead, he walked around. The bats are still here. They haven't left. The traces of activity are still fresh. There are bat droppings at the cave entrance, Xiao Xian said. So, only the bat leader left? Why would that be? Ao did not understand. That bat leader abandoned its minions and went to Yinjiao alone to steal grains every night? Xiao Xian could not think of a reason either. Let's go take a look at the king's stoneworm. Xiao Xian called Cha-Cha over and left with Ao and the other 2. They went to the mountain that they had not been to for a long time. Years ago, Xiao Xian had carried the remains of his ancestors out from there. If it were not for the ancestral bone ornaments, those remains would have been swallowed by the mountain. Once again, they came to the cave entrance that they had not seen for a long time. Xiao Xian looked at the handwriting on the cave entrance, bowed according to tradition, and then walked in. Chapter 677. Xiao Xian remembered that the animals living in this mountain were not very powerful. Because of the existence of the king beast, other powerful ferocious beasts were not allowed to live in this mountain. The weaker animals were no threat to the king beast, so it could ignore them. It was like a lion could ignore an ant, but it would not ignore a wolf that entered its territory. The Yinjiao tribe had lived here for nearly 1,000 years. Generations of hunting teams had passed through here and gone to the hunting grounds on the other side of the mountain. They rarely encountered any trouble in the cave. Only when new young warriors joined the team would the creatures living in the cave target them. Xiao Xian had encountered this in the past. Xiao Xian had not been here for a long time, but he knew what kind of creatures lived in the cave. However, when he walked into the cave, he clearly sensed many strange auras that should not have appeared here. It is indeed different. Xiao Xian remembered the path through the mountain. He didn't need Mai to lead the way. He could just follow the path in his memory. They were ambushed several times by some ferocious beasts hiding in the dark. Xiao Xian could handle them all. Otherwise, Mai would have told him about it. The stronger ferocious beasts in the forest should have known that the king stoneworm used to live here. So they all stayed away. Even if the king stoneworm was no longer here, they would still avoid this dangerous place for a short period of time. The higher the level of the beast, the sharper its senses. Even if the king stoneworm was no longer in the mountain, the aura it had left behind would still have a deterrent effect on them. The tip of the sword pierced through a six-legged bug that attacked them and stabbed into the cave wall, leaving a dent in it. Not far from the dent, there were other marks left by sharp weapons. They were left behind by Mai's hunting team and had not disappeared yet. Walking in the cave, Xiao Xian released his senses to check if the king stoneworm had really left. Xiao Xian could sense the fire seed aura on people within a certain range. Even those who had not merged with the fire seed would have some aura on them, just not as strong. When they were traveling downstream, Xiao Xian could sense the fire seeds of the tribes around the river bank because of the same ability. That was because of the power of inheritance. Compared to the totemic power that strengthened the body, the power of inheritance was more of a spiritual power. The stronger the power of inheritance, the stronger the power of inheritance. Xiao Xian could sense the fire seeds far away because of the power of inheritance in his body. Actually, Xiao Xian could sense the bat leader's location in the 1,000-grain gold field because of this ability. He could sense it when he was digging for fire crystals, but it was too blurry back then. That night, when he sensed the bat leader, it was even clearer. It was just that the bat leader had hidden itself too well. If it were any other fearsome beast of the same level, Ao and the rest would have sensed it from that distance. However, Ao's power of inheritance was not as strong as his totemic power, so his senses were not as good as Xiao Xian's. There was one thing that Xiao Xian did not tell Ao and the rest. When he sensed the bat leader, he saw a spot of light similar to a fire seed. That bright spot of light was the bat leader. How could a fearsome beast have the power of a fire seed on it? What surprised Xiao Xian the most was that the power of a fire seed on the bat leader was a little bit similar to the power of the Yinjiao's fire seed. He could feel the difference between the two, but the surprise was also obvious. If the power of the fire seed on the bat leader was 100%, then it was only 10% similar to the power of the Yinjiao. Of the remaining 90%, 10% was similar to another power in Xiao Xian's body. The remaining 80% was completely different from the power of the Yinjiao's fire seed. In Xiao Xian's sea of consciousness, there was not only the Yinjiao's totemic flame, but also the light shield that covered the totemic flame. The power of the bat leader was similar to the power of the light shield. Perhaps because of this, the bat leader did not attack the Yinjiao people. It did not mean that it regarded the Yinjiao people as its companions. Xiao Xian believed that the bat leader regarded the Yinjiao people as its little brothers. But it was the little bit of similarity that made Xiao Xian very confused. The only thing that could connect the bat leader with the Yinjiao was that the bat leader had absorbed the power of the fire crystals before it was separated from all the other bat leaders. And those fire crystals were burned by Xiao Xian with his own power. Xiao Xian did not know the real reason, and it was not the time to think about it. He just used the power of the fire seed and the bat leader to perceive the king stoneworm under the mountain, which had not been known for many years. He had been in close contact with the king stoneworm before, but he did not see it with his own eyes. But if he perceived the king stoneworm again, he would definitely recognize it. Xiao Xian recalled the feeling of being almost petrified and turning every drop of sweat into stone. It was still very clear when he thought about it. Ao and the others, who were walking behind Xiao Xian, saw that Xiao Xian slowed down, but they did not urge him. Instead, they were on guard against the surroundings. If only Xiao Xian could use the rope divination to find out the reason. Ao thought in his heart. Xiao Xian sensed the surroundings. Because there were rocks all around, he could not perceive the fire seeds of other tribes like he could when he was on a long journey. Here the range of his perception was greatly reduced. But according to Xiao Xian's memory, where the king's stoneworm had appeared, even if the range of his perception was reduced, as long as the king's stoneworm was still there, he should be able to detect it. However, nothing. Still nothing. Xiao Xian continued forward. He did not retract his perception. Even when he walked out of the cave and came to the other side of the mountain, he still could not detect the king's stoneworm. The king's stoneworm is indeed no longer here, Xiao Xian said. This was not good news for the Yinjiao people. They did not care about other beasts' territory changes, but it was different for a king beast. Generally speaking, king beasts would not easily change the location of their territory. For example, on the other side of the sea, the salt beast guarded its salt flats. Even if it was disturbed, it had no intention of leaving. Over here, the king's stoneworm that had not moved for 1,000 years had already left its nest. In fact, the king's stoneworm's territory was not small. The salt beast's territory was horizontal, more like flat land, but the king's stoneworm's was vertical. The mountain in front of them spanned an unknown distance. Although it was long and narrow, the peaks reached into the clouds. Very few birds could fly over it. Moreover, there was a large area underground. This place was not smaller than the salt flats. It was hard to understand why such a territory would be abandoned so easily. Xiao Xian went to find the cave he had carried his ancestors out of. He walked in for a while but did not go too deep. There were also some beasts that had not come close in the past. It was rare to see the bones of some small beasts. For this mountain that seemed to be able to swallow anything, bones, and the like would not stay for long. But now the leftovers of these predators have been left here for who knew how long. The king's stoneworm has indeed disappeared for a long time, Xiao Xian said to Ao and the others. Perhaps it left last year during the disaster. If the king's stoneworm had gone somewhere else, such as deeper into the forest, it would not have affected the Yinjiao tribe. But what if it had run to Yinjiao? The bat leader's movements were too sudden. If they did not figure it out, they would not be at ease. And if the king beast did not do anything else, everyone would think that it had gone deeper into the forest to find a new nest. Given its level, as long as it did not encounter other king beasts, the other beasts in the forest would have to make way for it. What should we do next? Ao thought of the bat leader walking around the Yinjiao tribe every day. He felt as if there was a huge rock pressing down on his heart. It was difficult for him to even breathe. He was worried that the huge rock would fall down and cause a bloody scene. As long as the Yinjiao people do not take the initiative to attack, the bat leader will not attack the Yinjiao people for the time being. After all, there were some similarities in the fire seed. If the bat leader wanted to attack the Yinjiao people, it would have already attacked them. But during this time, they had not heard of anyone disappearing for no reason. Also, tell the wanderers in the tribe not to run around. The bat leader may not attack the Yinjiao people, but I am not sure about the wanderers, Xiao Xian said. Although Ao did not understand the basis of Xiao Xian's words, he nodded in agreement. He also felt that the bat leader would not attack the Yinjiao people for the time being. After all, there were several opportunities to kill the Yinjiao people in the past, but the bat leader did not do so. But we can't go on like this. Even if the bat leader did not attack, with such a dangerous creature around, no one could sleep well. Xiao Xian thought for a moment and said, "You wait here for Mai and the others. I will go to the Bat Mountain to take a look." Okay. Ao took the other two to find a place to rest first and wait for Mai and the others. Xiao Xian asked Cha-Cha to take him to the Bat Mountain. Previously, Xiao Xian had only walked around the Bat Mountain once. But this time, he planned to look around the Bat Mountain. There were several guesses about the bat leader's strange behavior. One of them was that it was affected by the king stoneworm's strange behavior. After all, at its level, it would not be easily affected by other beasts. To rule out this possibility, Xiao Xian had to look around the Bat Mountain. Was there any strange phenomenon that forced the bat leader to give up on the Bat Mountain and run elsewhere? Not to mention that the bat leader liked the Yinjiao headquarters. If that was the case, it would have gone there last year. Why wait until now? The 1,000-grain gold was too far away from here, and it was not ripe yet. It was unlikely that it was attracted by that. Xiao Xian sat on the eagle's back and looked down at the forest below. Cha-Cha flew at a height that was neither too high nor too low. Not only could he see the scenery below clearly, but he could also avoid the ancient trees and possible threats on the trees. In the past, Cha-Cha had suffered because he flew too low and was dragged down from the sky. The Bat Mountain was not on the hunting route of Mai's hunting team. Xiao Xian did not go there often, so there were many places that were unfamiliar to him. Cha-Cha's flight path was circling around the Bat Mountain. In the forest, there was a huge difference in temperature between different places. Sometimes one side of the mountain was as cold as autumn, while the other side was as hot as summer. But in general, at this time of the year, the forest was still mostly green. The green ancient trees were the main color of the forest. The only thing that could compete with them were the tall mountains. From the middle of the mountain, there was a sharp decrease in the greenery. From green to gray rocks, and then to white snow on the mountain peak. The gray rocks on the cliffs separated the greenery under the blue sky. Xiao Xian was already used to such changes in color. But as he gradually flew out, Xiao Xian noticed something special. There was a short mountain there. Even if there were no trees on a normal short mountain, there would still be some grass. But there were only gray rocks there. As he flew closer, Xiao Xian could see more clearly. The gray-white short mountain stood out among the large expanse of ancient trees. Let's go down and take a look. Xiao Xian jumped down after Cha-Cha flew lower. He landed not far from the short mountain. Crack, crack, crack. Xiao Xian stepped on the grass. It was obviously not the soft grass. He looked down. Some of the green grass had turned gray, and was still very hard. Some of the surrounding trees had also turned into the color of rocks. The closer he got to the short mountain, the more obvious the change was. At the edge of the short mountain, there were many rocks that looked like tree trunks. They used to be trees, but the upper half was broken. Only the lower half was left. Even the texture of the bark was very clear. Petrification. Others might not know about this change, but Xiao Xian already had a guess. Among all the people and beasts that Xiao Xian had seen, only the king stoneworm could do this. What was it doing here instead of in its own nest? Xiao Xian walked up the short mountain. He could sense that the king stoneworm was not nearby, so he was not worried that he would be petrified as well. There was not a single blade of grass or tree growing on the short mountain. The rocks looked new. The king stoneworm had not been here for long. He continued walking up the short mountain. At the top of the short mountain, there was a round hole about 2 meters wide. Xiao Xian squatted at the hole and looked down. He did not know how deep it was. Based on the curvature of the hole, the king stoneworm should have come out from underground. It just did not come out completely. It only poked its head out for a bit before going back underground. Because of the king stoneworm's movements, the ground had bulged and formed this short mountain made of rocks. Even the trees and flowers nearby had been petrified. The hole on the short mountain had narrowed as the king stoneworm retreated underground. When it had hardened completely, it could not shrink any further. That was how it was now. The Yinjiao people had thought that the king stoneworm's size should be about the same as the hole in the mountain. However, Xiao Xian felt that the king stoneworm should be bigger than the hole in the mountain. Just like the hole on the short mountain, as the king stoneworm left, the hole would shrink to varying degrees. However, these were all Xiao Xian's guesses. He had never seen the king stoneworm with his own eyes. Standing on the short mountain, Xiao Xian looked at the Bat Mountain. It was not close. Otherwise, Xiao Xian and the others would have discovered it when they first approached the Bat Mountain. However, it was not too far. At this distance, perhaps the Bat Leader could sense it. Could it really be because of the King Stoneworm that the Bat Leader was forced to leave the Bat Mountain and go to Yinjiao? After all, in the Bat Leader's eyes, the Yinjiao people might be its underlings. Unable to be sure, Xiao Xian had Cha-Cha take him into the air to continue searching. They wanted to see if there were any more short mountains like this, especially in the direction of the Yinjiao tribe. If they found it in the direction of the Yinjiao tribe, then the Yinjiao people would be in big trouble. No one wanted to fight a king beast, even if the Flaming Horn tribe thought of the king stoneworm as a peaceful beast. Otherwise, they wouldn't have set up a hunting route that had lasted for almost 1,000 years. None of them had ever been attacked by the king stoneworm. However, no one could say for sure what would happen if they went up against a king stoneworm. Fortunately, Xiaoxian did not find any more short mountains like this one after searching in the direction of the tribe. Even so, he could not be completely relieved. Where did it go? Xiaoxian went back to the short mountain. Xiaoxian told Ao, and the others had also come over. How about I go down and take a look? Xiaoxian said. Since the king stoneworm had gone through a place, there must be a tunnel underground. They could follow this tunnel to find out where the king stoneworm was. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.